This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, and Lisa Mateo. Back to normal coverage in a very unnormal time. Thank you for being with us on your commute across America on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Huge day yesterday, Paul, on YouTube, from living rooms, from offices.
It's that internet thing, Tom. I think it's here to stay.
Can you do, like, you know, when you work out every day, you do your 6 miles on the machine.
Of course. Yeah, exactly.
Can you watch YouTube at the same time?
You can do it all right on your phone.
You can do it
it's
all
good.
where you want.
Yep.
Right now we go to
CarPlay.
England, sticking out like a sore thumb, a Labour government, a more left government versus what we see in Italy, the German government shattering yesterday, and of course all the election here. The Bank of England cuts rates.
The Bank of England voted for a 25 basis point cut and one for no change. So we've got 8 folks voting for that 25 basis point cut there. So the Bank of England arguably kind of leading the way. We'll see what happens from the Federal Reserve today, Tom, at 2 o'clock.
That American, the professor from Brandeis, formerly with Citigroup, Catherine Mann, voted to leave the key rate at 5%. Okay. She's a hawk. But I like how they have a foreign type in to the Bank of Great Britain. You know, we don't do that. I think it makes for an interesting time. Pretty much everybody on board. Professor Mann voted to leave the key rate at 5%. Cable 129.17. I'm going to call it a churn here with a continued lift in the market. Lisa will talk about that. We got to get right to it. Ed Mills to join us here on Your New Politics across America. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, up and away, Lisa Mateo.
And yes, we go. Futures. Well, right now, just trying to hold on to those gains after the Trump trade went in overdrive yesterday, setting stock indexes to record highs. You had the Dow surge to its biggest gain in 2 years. Right now, we'll check in with Dow futures up 0.2%, 101 points. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 54 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, about 13 points. We head over to the bond market. We have the 2-year yield 4.26%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.45%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, have to check there. The dollar kind of retreating following its best day since 2022, down about 0.2%. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger right now. Bitcoin, which rallied almost 10% yesterday, now down about 1.5% at about 74,000. Checking with 2 stocks that really soared after Donald Trump was elected president. Trump Media and Technology now down 14%. Tesla down 0.5%. And we go over to shares of Qualcomm, the world's biggest seller, smartphone processors. Well, the shares right now, they are lower this morning. Qualcomm is down, is up about 6% this morning. They're higher. And then you go in the meanwhile to shares of ARM Holdings. They're the UK chip designer, also dependent on the smartphone market. Their shares are lower this morning. ADR is down about 6%. And that was after it delivered a disappointing sales forecast. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. In the political maelstrom that we're living in, Paul, we don't have the House decision yet, do we?
We don't.
Sort of edging GOP, but we don't.
From what I understand, from what
we're
I
waking
read,
up uncertain.
Yep.
It's always good when you're uncertain to speak with Edward Mills. Ed Mills is Washington policy analyst at Raymond James, steeped in inside the Beltway and inside the white marble of Capitol Hill of what's going on. Ed, I want to avoid the punditry. The single statistic that sticks out to me is 1 in 5 voters, 20%, went 76% for Trump on immigration. So I go 0.20 times 0.76. 15.2% of the voting said what matters is immigration. What does President Trump do if the GOP takes the House with McClintock of Sacramento on the Judiciary Committee, on the Subcommittee of Judiciary, on immigration and deportation? What does Trump do with McClintock or Jim Jordan, or what does he do with executive order on immigration?
So, Tom, I think we start off this morning with an assumption that it probably is a GOP sweep. It probably is a small majority in the House for Republicans. There's a question between having a majority and an ability to govern with that. But with Trump in the White House, the ability to put pressure on the marginal Republican in the House is quite large. So I think it's important to think about what can be done legislatively, as you're asking. But with immigration, I think what is going to be done is almost exclusively first through the executive branch. I think what is allowed for temporary protective status, deportation of individuals who've committed crimes, those are the first thrust of this. The extent of how far this goes, that's the big debate.
So we're going to get Mr. Trump, President Trump, in the Oval Office, and Paul, help me here. He takes the executive order, opens it up, he does the big Trump signature.
Yep.
Ed Mills, what is that document going to say?
It's going to say a coordinated effort to limit kind of border crossings, limit kind of who is eligible for amnesty and different temporary protective status, telling law enforcement agencies to work through the caseload to get folks who have been committed of a crime to be kind of work on deportation. And then we'll see how much pushback is there, because when I talk to clients at Raymond James, the first thing that comes up is the further we go on some of these policies, especially immigration, are we back in a labor shortage environment? Is that inflationary?
My colleague,
is that a market mover?
Yeah, my colleague Paul Sweeney wants to jump in, but one key question here for Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Can he do an executive order so at the margin the first deportation comes out of the tri-state area?
You can prioritize where you do it. And, I certainly think that he is going to look to do this in a way that, A, has a lot of pushback from the left, and B, trying to show his supporters that he was serious about what he was running on.
Yeah.
Ed, talk to us about the first 100 days. We know that's important for any new administration. What do you think the Trump administration to-do list will look for the first 100 days?
Yeah, Paul, so when we've been talking to folks at Raymond James, one of the things that we've said is the first 100 days next year are going to look very different than the first 100 days in 2017, because this time Trump has actually invested in a transition team. They have set out different plans. And so I think what they're going to see is how quickly can they get the debt limit done? How quickly can they start moving on a budget in the House to work on tax reform? How quickly can they move on immigration-related issues? How quickly can they say they're starting to shrink the federal budget? What I'm telling clients is a lot of this is going to sound almost inevitable, but it always hits up against a certain level of reality in DC. And so the first 100-day plans versus the first 100-day outcomes are probably going to be quite different.
Taxes, that's a big issue for a lot of folks. What do you expect the Trump administration to try to push for on the tax front?
So I think the base case is an extension of the 2017 law. That costs $4.7 trillion. But Donald Trump has run on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, removing the SALT tax. You can add that up and it quickly is north of $10 trillion, maybe even approaching $15 trillion. So we're going to look to see, are there pay-fors? Is there a robust trade and tariff agenda that seeks to offset some of that money?
Right.
We're going to see just how much the bond market allows Republicans to do. That's where we saw the big reaction yesterday in the 10-year. It can go higher if we are seeing a closer to $10 trillion versus $5 trillion package being proposed.
Ed Mills, I want to circle back to your heritage and all that you've done on Capitol Hill. What will be the relationship of Senate Republicans and House Republicans like Mr. McClintock from Sacramento down to Fresno? What will be will they have a frosty relation with President Trump? Are they going to be sipping beers on the South Portico? What's it going to look like?
Oh, Tom, I think this is totally different. It's because it's going to be a much warmer relationship. You have to look at how much changeover there's been in the House and in the Senate, especially on the Republican side, over the last 8 years. When Donald Trump showed up in 2017, he had almost no congressional allies because he was such a shock to the system, especially here in Washington, D.C. A lot of those folks, like a Jim Jordan you mentioned, those are some of his closest allies. In the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who had an extremely frosty relationship with Donald Trump, he's going to still be there, but no longer the leader. So I'm looking to see, is there someone who comes up and has a good relationship with Trump? And so just a fundamental different way of doing this. a plan to enact things. So I think that early 2025 and throughout 2025, it's going to be a much more robust year policy-wise than 2017 was. And buckle up, because there's a lot of market impact there.
Well, love it. Thank you. I was watching like the punditry industry last night, and it's a breath of fresh air to talk to Ed Mills.
Yes.
About like what's going on. Ed Mills, thank you so much. Really, really love that to start out the show. Futures advance again. When did the market last go down?
It
was like 7 p.m. election night.
Exactly.
Futures up 15. The VIX 15.59. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Donald Trump spent his first day as president-elect receiving congratulatory phone calls from President Joe Biden and world leaders. Vice President Kamala Harris also called Trump to concede the race and to congratulate him. Yesterday, Harris delivered her concession speech from Howard University.
So to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
Meanwhile, President Biden will give a speech later today. Bloomberg will carry it live starting at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. California fire officials are working to battle the growing mountain fire. It has already burned more than 14,000 acres, and evacuations have been ordered for several areas, including the city of Camarillo. Ventura County Fire Chief Dustin Gardner.
Every firefighter in the region, every law enforcement agency available, every helicopter, every fixed-wing aircraft, everything we've been able to get a hold of is here fighting this fire.
The fire is fueled by dry conditions with winds gusting up to 80 miles per hour. Cuba is reeling after a powerful Category 3 hurricane ripped across the island and fierce winds knocked out the country's power grid. Forecasters had warned that Hurricane Rafael could bring life-threatening storm surges, winds, and flash floods. UNICEF is asking for help to provide relief to a large group of children affected by a historic drought along the Amazon River. Antonio Mauro is an emergency manager with the organization.
This is basically the strongest drought in history in the last century, and unfortunately there are no improvement expected in the coming weeks and months. Several tributaries of the Amazon River are literally drying up.
UNICEF's Antonio Mauro says they estimate more than 420,000 children are currently affected by this. Finally, it's now virtually certain 2024 will be the hottest year on record. According to the European Climate Agency Copernicus, this year will be the first with over 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit of warming above the pre-industrial average. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
We go to surveillance beach correspondent Paul Sweeney here. How's the water? There's no ice in the water yet.
No ice in the water. It's fantastic.
Getting a little cooler.
Yeah, it's a little chilly.
What are the dolphins
It's
doing?
in the mid-60s. They're out there like crazy. And the whales this summer were out of control. I mean, they're like 50 yards off the shore.
You can see a whale from where you are.
It's in New Jersey. I mean, we're not like in Australia here. I mean, this is New Jersey, so I don't know what's going on out there, but the sea life is in pretty good form on the Jersey Shore.
What a privilege it was once to talk to Arthur Levitt, who's a fisherman, about the cleaning up of New York Harbor.
Oh, yeah.
And he says he remembers when it was terrible. It was appalling.
Right.
And the whole thing from New York deep south down to New Jersey.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a far distant future.
No, I tell you, the water's the clearest it's been in my lifetime. It's just extraordinary.
Surveillance beach reporter Paul
go.
Sweeney there with a report this morning. It is Fed Day. We'll have complete coverage and go on to 1:30 and 2 p.m. We're all here for Mr. Powell. He will not talk politics. This is Bloomberg's Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. All right, stocks trying to hold on to their post-election gains. Dollar, Treasury yields easing. Traders now looking ahead to Donald Trump's return to the White House. Also what it means for the Fed's interest rate path. And speaking of which, policymakers announcing their decision 2 p.m. Wall Street time today. That's followed by some words from Chair Jay Powell. Meanwhile, the BOE, well, they cut its key rate by 25 basis points at 4.75%. Let's get to the numbers. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up about 0.3%, 68 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 103 points. S&P futures up about 15 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.26%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.44%, and that is little changed. To commodities, we'll start with Brent crude down about 0.7% at $74 a barrel. WTI crude $70 a barrel. To earnings we go. High cocoa prices. Well, they're pushing Hershey to cut its full year sales outlook. Its shares down nearly 2% right now. And Tapestry, they raised their guidance for the year. Better than expected quarterly revenue at the Coach brand. Strong sales in Europe, too, on top of that. Its shares up more than 4%. And then Under Armour, they boosted their adjusted earnings per share guidance for the full year. Beat estimates, their shares up more than 6%. There you go. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul.
Under Armour, you know what it is, right? Under Armour.
The sports gear.
Yeah.
Tapestry. It's
Coach.
What is Tapestry? It reminds me there was a thing called Primerica years ago, which was the American Can Company, among other things.
Yep.
Greg Peters with us right now on interest rates. We've got some very good guests today, just to reframe in the midst of this melt up off of a Trump victory. Mr. Peters is with PGIM on fixed income. Do you reset to a higher yield structure, Greg Peters? Or are vectors in place as they were 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ago?
I think it is a reset on the margin, and I think it's a reset predominantly because of the fiscal side. And we're already starting out with a pretty severe deficit on the margin. That just makes it more difficult. The tariffs, and who knows how that'll shake out, is on the margin inflationary. So, yes, I do think there is a reset, and the markets have responded to that. The past couple of weeks, it responded yesterday. And then you also have, Tom, the reinforcing aspect that we're starting out from a pretty strong macro backdrop. Yeah. So the combination of those two things, I think, resets the front end and resets the back end.
Greg, we are going to hear from the Fed today. What do you expect to hear at 2 o'clock today from our Federal Reserve?
Yeah, not a lot, I think. There is a window. I think it's a fait accompli that you get a 25 basis point cut today, probably in December as well. And then I think that's where it gets a little more challenging. That's when the policy starts to get more tangibly formed. And I think it'll give the Fed a better understanding of maybe what they're up against. But I think today is a done deal for sure. But I think the real question is, where do they want to go? And quite honestly, I think it's important to zoom out. And I think where central banks want to go globally is to this idea of neutral. And if you look at policy rates across the globe, they're broadly still quite restrictive. So they want to be less restrictive. And that's the mantra for 2025.
Greg, are you taking credit risk out there, or are you just sitting right with me at my 2-year Treasury at 4.25%?
Credit is really tricky and interesting. So there's been a big rally in credit. I think it's important to remember that credit spreads are supposed to be tight when the macro is strong, right? It is very much of two sides of the same coin. At the same time, however, you look at high yield. High yield spreads are in striking distance, 20 basis points away from the all-time heights from 1997. Same for IG. So there's not a lot of room for upside here. So what we're doing at PGIM is actually going against the grain. So we used the opportunity yesterday to use a strong environment and spreads to take our spread risk down, just because the risk reward is decidedly tilted against us.
So where is value out there in the fixed income world, Greg?
I think value is in safety. The way we're playing it is what we call in fixed income roll and carry. So we're in the short end of the spread market. So just call it like, 3-year type of single B paper where it's safe. It rolls down the curve. You're not taking excessive spread risk or credit risk. We still see value in the structured product space where you're not really exposed to the macro. And we feel like it's a very good kind of risk reward. The agency mortgage space is interesting. Volatility is quite high, of course, so that makes it less attractive on the margin. But the mortgage basis vis-a-vis investment-grade corporates look attractive. So there's lots to do. And the last point I would make is that this uneven path of getting to neutral, this uneven path of inflation and growth globally really makes the global bond market quite attractive and interesting.
Okay, well, Damian Sassar is calling in and saying, okay, great, but where in the world, Greg Peters? Is it Pacific Rim? Is it EM? Do you buy gilts with all that's going on in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, so Europe is interesting. UK is interesting. You think about, growth is, much more muted there, to say the least. Inflation, is, coming down. You look at jurisdictions like Germany as an example. I think you need to see, much lower front-end rates. That's going to push yields down. Right. And then as you formulate what this policy means out of a Trump administration for emerging markets, right. The view there is that, local markets are quite attractive, right? So right. Policy rates have to come down, be more stimulative, and that's a very good bond play.
I mean, I know November 15th, Greg Peters, you go to a 3-day work week, which is better than Perselli. Perselli goes to a 2-day work week. But are we going to shut down? Is issuance just going to go away here at the end of the year with the election?
Issuance never gets shut down. There is just an unending stream of new deals that come. And the street has been calling for a lower issuance the past several years. That has yet to come to fruition. But I think the other side of the equation here, Tom, is the demand is just incredibly strong. There's so much cash in the system. But when we think about issuance, the real story around issuance is what's coming out of the U.S. Treasury. It's just eye-popping, eye-watering type of numbers, and that supply has to be absorbed, and that is what we're focused on in 2025.
Never enough time. Greg Peters, thank you so much. He's with PGIM on yield and clipping of the coupon.
Tom, look at the 30-year mortgage here. We're back up to 6.81%.
Yeah.
I mean, we were pushing 6%. People were looking for a 5-handle. Boy, it's moved a lot higher
some
recently.
of the expect the unexpecteds as we go through our political maelstrom of the next number of days. I want to touch on this a couple times during the show because it's Paul Sweeney's real expertise. The remaining audience was spread across the CW, Merritt Street Media, Scripps News, Telemundo, Univision, CNBC, Bloomberg, CNN, Fox Business, Newsmax, News Nation, and PBS. It's the ratings for election night. Everybody was down massive. I mean, they were down massive, Paul, and it's a fracturing of what we used to. We used to tune into chat. Sure. David, Walter,
exactly, gone. And that fracturing of the media. I mean, there's so many outlets, Tom, on air, on the internet. There's just so many opportunities. So everybody's audience has been diluted over the last 20, 30 years. And so that's the new world order. That's why sports still sells.
Fox News is down about 27%. You would have thought they were up 80%.
Right.
With the news going on. And
everybody's got, it's cord cutting, Tom. It's a thing.
It's a cord cutting and a thing, but it's also what we're doing, which is a digital thing.
Yep.
There's a lot of people.
They're on YouTube, Tom. They're on
going
YouTube.
to digital. I need some sleep.
Exactly.
I mean, I
take tomorrow off.
Lisa wants me to walk 5 miles today. It's not going to happen.
I ran yesterday.
You ran yesterday? Oh, my God.
That's just sick.
Yeah.
It's Fed Day. Lisa Mateo will be running 2 p.m. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. So markets taking a little bit of a breather after digesting the effects of Donald Trump presidency that really sent the stock indexes to record highs yesterday. Let's get to the numbers. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.3%, 80 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 89 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 15 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.26%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.43%, and that is little change. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker. Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin, what a difference, down more than 1% at around 74,000. To earnings we go. Shares of Moderna, they're up about 8%, better than expected profit sales in the third quarter. And a big part of that was an early start to sales of this season's COVID boosters. Novo Nordisk, their blockbuster Wegovy weight loss drug, well, that beat sales expectations in the third quarter. Their ADRs up more than 1%. And finally, Lyft, living up to its name, stock soaring up 24%, reported strong guidance and also record trips. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. The reason Lisa paused there coming in, I saw her, she was looking at her iPhone. She's looking at her step count.
Oh, my gosh.
32,000 steps yesterday.
Please.
I'm behind.
Oh, my God.
A panic. What's our goal every day? 50,000 steps?
Only 10,000.
7,500 yesterday for me, so I walked to Penn Station. How about that?
Good
Wow.
for you.
Yep.
Wow.
What a walk that is, by the way.
Yeah, no kidding.
I did 189 steps.
There you go.
And walked across Fifth
Yep.
Avenue. Got to the other
Got into the
side.
Bentley.
We're
and
going to
you're all
pause
set
here.
to
We're
go.
going to digress. With us, we had a huge response when she was in last time with Chatham Europe. Jackie Bowie's here, our managing partner. And on YouTube, you can see that Jackie Bowie is ensconced in this November with the red poppy. Tell our American audience, you have a jeweled red poppy. It is lovely.
Yes.
Tell us of the British in World War I and November 11th and the red poppy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such a big day for us in the UK where, and whilst the poppy is to represent obviously the poppy fields after the war ended, the celebration and recognition on the 11th of November is really through all the wars and people who have given their lives for their country. So, yeah, we take it very seriously. You can buy lots of different types of poppies now, and obviously all of that donation goes to the Royal British Legion for the veterans.
Very good. Let us talk about the loneliness of the United Kingdom. We have a left government, a Labour government. Tories were trounced. John Burns Murdoch has a fabulous chart today showing the crater of the Tories versus Italy versus Trump in the election here in the United States. How alone is the United Kingdom right now within G7?
Yeah, well, it certainly feels like some of the political statements that were made in the run-up to the election and afterwards are really divergent from what's happening in the rest of Europe. We talked briefly, obviously, this morning just on the stance on immigration and different countries taking a slightly stronger view on asylum seekers, countries that were very pro-immigration before. So the Labour government have come in and kind of paused the previous government's route to taking illegal migrants to Rwanda. That was the plan, to take them for the processing and then decide whether they had the right to remain in the UK. So that plan is now being completely taken away, and we're just kind of waiting to see. So yeah, it does feel that the UK is sort of out in a limb, which is interesting, right? Because we're an island. So if anything, we should potentially have a stronger position.
So the Bank of England cut rates again today. Give us a sense of kind of what the Bank of England is thinking about in terms of interest rates and the economy in the UK.
Yeah, so I mean, 25 basis points was as expected. If we had talked just a week ago before the budget, we would have said 25 basis points for November and a further 25 likely in December. And that's been the big shift. So the UK budget was absolutely about tax raising, about spending on public services with no conditions of improvement in productivity. And that has led the market to start to reduce their expectation that we'll get a further 25 in December. I think the other thing to bear in mind is everyone's focused on this headline inflation target, which, at the 2%, obviously the Bank of England is just out, so we've not kind of digested the full statement yet, but it looks like the inflation forecast for next year will be around 2.6, 2.7%. So you're starting to see that, that you're not getting inflation at that 2% target.
Why is the American Catherine Mann, as a member of the Bank of England, dissenting and saying don't cut rates? Is it a nominal GDP call?
She's always been kind of on that side of the fence, if you look at her voting history.
Sure.
So she's been consistent, for one. But yeah, you're right. An 8-1 vote with her being the only dissenter this time round. She continues to focus on that inflation number, and particularly the underlying services inflation and wage inflation in the UK, saying that this inflation issue is not under control, so rates should be kept higher.
All right, if Tom and I were to come over to the UK, which we're working on that as we speak,
Yes, we are.
and to go to the Highlands or the Midlands, and what are the person on the street, what are they saying about the economy in the UK these days?
I would say it's very similar to the US, in that everyone is talking about and we say this cost of living as a catch-all. The major things for the UK, which I think is the same in the US, is food prices.
Okay.
The second,
you're right. Yep.
and the second thing for the UK, which I don't feel you get the same situation here, is fuel prices. So we have huge taxes on our fuel. Underlying fuel prices are just higher in the UK. So if you're driving, a combustion engine, not an electric car, the cost of filling up your car and heating your house has gone up massively. I think my utility bills are probably up about 45%.
Then how can Labour ram through tax increases?
Good question.
I'm fascinated.
That's why
the debate is very different from here. There's a huge understanding that Mr. Trump, day 1, day 2, day 3, will extend or codify, if you will, the Trump tax cuts. Is it just genuine Clement Attlee austerity from the middle of the 20th century? Is it just England demands to be austere?
Well, you would say it's the opposite, right? Because the government are spending like billio, despite the deficit being where it is. Again, similar to other countries, the UK is not alone in that. Yeah. But to put through all these tax increases, which are to support the public sector. So let's look at where that spending is going. When you're increasing taxes, particularly on employers and national insurance taxation, there's nothing in it which is growth orientated, which is why it was taken so negatively. I don't think anyone has any issues with government spending if you then end up, really boosting growth. But after the budget was announced and people saw the extent of the total spend over the next 4 years, but no change to the growth forecast.
And literally almost all of the Tottenham Spurs soccer team is threatening to leave the country, which actually would probably be constructive for Tottenham.
Exactly. Talk to us about, I don't know how many years on we are from, 7-8 years on from Brexit. What's the feeling today? What's the consensus today?
Yeah, people have stopped complaining about it.
Okay.
I think the one thing I would say though is it's been really difficult to separate out the impact of Brexit on the economy because we hit COVID, right?
Okay.
And you're starting to say, well, is the UK situation because of Brexit or because of COVID? If you dig really deep into it, and looking at some of the trade numbers, etc., it looks like the UK has actually done okay. But there's a lot of
the dumb question of the day. When you fly to Berlin or Geneva, do you have to go through customs now and passport control?
Yeah, so you always had to go through passport control, but you were classed as an EU traveller. And
now you're not.
So now you're not.
And is that much more difficult now?
It depends where you go. So interestingly, if you go to, I had a few trips in the summer, fortunately, to Palma in Mallorca, so Spain. You just go through the electronic gates as normal. The only difference is you have to get a stamp. If you go to Paris or any French airport, you are in the long line. You are in the long line.
See, that's the news you can use, Tom.
That's the news. Yeah, I was sort of shocked how easy it was when I went over to Rome last month.
They had the gates open
but
for
the
you,
luggage took hours. The luggage was an absolute outrage. I mean, it was like people were really upset.
And you've got many pieces of luggage. I've seen
we
Tom
have
travel.
Emily Rowland's coming in from John Hancock today, and she's been dead on about American exceptionalism by large cap America. Can we buy large cap FTSE?
You can, but the definition of large cap in your global world, I mean, large cap FTSE is not going to be very large cap for you.
So it is Little Britain.
And the other thing, I think we talked about this when I was in before about.
I don't remember who I talked to last half hour except Lisa Mateo.
I remember you. We talked about your dinner at the Savoy. So,
dinner at the Savoy.
Yeah, dinner at the Savoy. The interesting thing for UK stocks is, you'll have seen this from your market, where there's a lot of the larger companies deciding to delist from the UK and choose to list in the US, because they have a broader investor base. Arguably their stock gets better valued. So a combination of that and the fact that private equity have been doing a lot of take privates in the UK, so delisting companies. Yeah. The choice of things to invest in the UK is getting smaller and smaller.
Jackie, thank you. What a brief. Jackie Bowie, thank you so much. With Chatham Europe this morning here. The Bank of England cutting interest rates, really, it's sort of a national thing. The Fed, is it going to cut interest rates today?
Michael McKee's he'll be reporting.
I don't know. We'll have to.
We sent him down to DC.
To see as we go. We say good morning to you, and of course we're waiting on the House, among others, to say the least. The House open here this morning. Futures up 14, Dow futures up 85, and the VIX 15.61. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President-elect Donald Trump spent Wednesday receiving congratulatory phone calls from world leaders, and today, while arriving for a meeting of the European political community in Budapest, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, offered her regards to Trump.
Let me take the opportunity to again congratulate Donald J. Trump for his clear victory. I'm looking forward to working with him again to strengthen the transatlantic bond.
Yesterday at Howard University, Vice President Kamala Harris, during her concession speech, told supporters she understands many of them may feel disappointed, but it's going to be okay.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
Meanwhile, President Biden invited Trump to meet with him in the White House in the near future. Now, Democrats are pinning their hopes on the House to avoid a full Republican sweep. GOP control of the Senate is assured. Republicans have a 52-seat majority so far, with races still left to be called in Arizona, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. In the House, Republicans currently hold a 206 to 191 seat edge. 38 congressional races are still being counted. One more election we're keeping tabs on, the race for mayor of San Francisco. The city is still tabulating results from Tuesday's election, but so far, political newcomer Daniel Lurie is holding his lead over current mayor London Breed. After 14 rounds of counting, philanthropists and Levi's heir Lurie has more than 56% of the ranked choice votes, with Breed at 43. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
You know, back in my youth, used to love to tune into ugly Midwest football.
Yep.
And it'd be like, Bears 15, Lions 12.
Yep.
Like a safety in the third quarter matter. We got two teams playing tonight that scored 79 points the last time they played. Michael Barr, do the Ravens, the Bengals, do they believe in defense?
No. And you can tell by the points, it's going to be a great game. I got to look at where the over-under is on this, because I bet you it's high. At least it's got to be in the 50s.
Two great quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So that's what everybody tunes in for.
But this is what the NFL wants, is razzle-dazzle.
Yep. Can't touch the receivers, can't touch the quarterbacks.
Dick Butkus wouldn't recognize the game.
No.
Okay.
But that's what they want.
Thursday night football. Maybe they'll top it out. 80 points. Let's see if we can get there. We're topping out the market. Futures up 12. Dow futures up 76. The VIX 15.64. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures advancing. This is following yesterday's historic rally. We'll go to NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 69 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 73 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 12 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.25%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.43%, and that is little changed. We head over to commodities. We have Brent crude down nearly 1% at $74 a barrel. WTI crude $70 a barrel. We have spot gold higher, up 0.4% at $2,671 an ounce. On the economic calendar, all eyes on the Fed. They're announcing their decision on interest rates 2 p.m. Wall Street time. That's followed by words from Chair Jay Powell. Now, policymakers expected to lower rates by 25 basis points. Also today, we have initial jobless claims for last week and a read on wholesale inventories. We go to shares of Zillow, up 13%. It reported third quarter earnings beat estimates, even though we have a sluggish home buying market. So not bad for Zillow. Costco, reported 7.2% revenue gain in October. Higher traffic, average ticket sales to shares are up. Shares are up about 1%. And Warner Brothers Discovery, revenue third quarter missed estimates. But here's the thing, it added 7 million streaming subscribers, HBO Max and Discovery. Box office sales, though, those fell about 40% when you compare it to last summer's Barbie extravaganza. Shares, though, up about 4%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
2 items here. Is there any impetus to get streaming straightened out before the end of the year?
No. I mean, they're all just trying to get the
profitability. They're all buying Dodgers merch and,
Yep. They're all just trying to get the profitability. Disney's there. Obviously, Netflix has been there for a long time, and everybody else is struggling.
Hollywood accounting.
Yep, exactly.
Lisa, Costco to the moon. I mean, Joe Feldman's over with Dana Telsey saying, Mateo's in aisle 7.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it is? It's those discretionary, like all the clothing, all that other stuff. You can pick off a pair of knockoff Lulus there.
That's what, because you don't go name brand Lulu.
They were such a knockoff Lulu was such a good band. They played Devo like nobody. Good morning, everyone. We're 2 days after the election. We're still waiting in the House, undecided. I'm not going to mince words. We protect the copyright of all of our guests. Go to Morgan Stanley to get a jewel of a lengthy post-election report by Monica Guerra, head of U.S. policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. Let me just get to Exhibit 1, because it's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They're going to get to Exhibit 1. Net interest outlays could account for nearly 2/3 of the federal deficit. Forget about all the happy. What's the budget constraint on the president-elect?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be back. But
you got huge response when you were in last time.
Yeah, good.
It was Zentner-like. It was like huge. Continue.
Fantastic. When we're thinking about the debt and deficit, what's important here is if you have a unified government, if we get to a place where Congress is unified, debt becomes less of a factor. Yes, we have this ballooning interest rate piece. It's going to have to become part of the discussion. But when you have unified government, that's when time to get your wish list items through. And so it becomes less about fiscal responsibility. So the best thing for the debt and deficit is actually to have that gridlock Congress, because then fiscal responsibility becomes the calling card.
So what's going to happen here without a gridlock Congress?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking at just the baseline for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and you're extending that, it adds about $5 trillion to the federal deficit over a 10-year period. 10-year period. What it doesn't account for, these estimates, is any kind of government reduction or efficiency measures that Trump has talked about.
Musk measures, if
you want to call it that. I like that. I might use it.
Use it still. Copyright. Mateo gets it.
The other factor is that there's no other sort of revenue raisers or clawbacks. So, for example, if they rolled back some of the clean energy tax credits, money that they can bring back into the government.
Paul, a clawback at home is where you order the offspring. They have to eat the leftovers seamless.
Exactly.
That's a clawback.
Monica, they say financial services, and we saw the big stocks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs yesterday just soar.
Yep.
Talk to us about financial services and how a Trump and a Republican administration, a Republican Congress we'll look at the financial services industry?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the rip from yesterday is because of the deregulation promise.
Okay.
And that's what you're likely to see, especially with financials. You're likely to see an SEC that is shaped differently and has different leadership, as well as potential push on the Basel III endgame provisions to be looser and more flexible on the cap requirements. So that's going to be a really big factor. Other areas that are deregulatory, right, are AI, tech, crypto. So we're likely to continue to see tailwinds in those areas.
How about if I'm an M&A banker or an M&A attorney, I feel pretty good now, because I mean the regulatory environment from the Federal Trade Commission to the Department of Justice, it's been tough to get deals done and approved. Is that also a beneficiary?
That is going to be a huge beneficiary.
Yeah.
Lena Khan does not have a job in January.
Right.
I mean, she probably will be employed, but not in the government. And so at this point, that's going to be an area that we look to. You could see M&A activity pick up as a response to that.
Are you paying attention to like a Trump cabinet? Because I'm not sure where the Trump cabinet's going to come from or when we're going to hear about that. But my assumption is that's going to be important as to where policy goes.
Yeah, and we're definitely paying attention to that. We're paying particular attention to who's heading up the Treasury. One of the things that is critical that we saw even at the RNC convention was that this is really Trump's party. So a lot of the rank and file are officially sort of sidelined at this point. The party has changed, the mood has changed, and so it'll be a lot of folks that have ideological similarities with Trump.
Part of the Guerra charm is on your resume, Director of Capital Budget and Economic Development for the City of New York. It means she gets great Yankees tickets.
Yeah.
Not that that means anything. Monica, just to cut to the chase, with the immigration shock of this election, how do we deport, exit, remove a migrant immigrant from, say, New York City or Chicago? Doesn't really matter. How do you actually budgetarily affect that?
It's going to be greater funding towards the Department of Homeland Security. That's going to be the first place that they increase spending. We think that that's going to be underneath a national defense and security budget line. Now, if we're thinking about the actual practicality of it,
yes,
state
that's
by
your
state,
world.
right? State by state, it's going to be an issue. You're going to have New York, fight to keep people, safe, or a sanctuary, especially in sanctuary city structures. That's going to be a problem.
That's going to be an Albany issue in the case of New York, not a New York City issue?
New York City could get involved, but Albany is going to probably be leading the charge. Now, the thing that's important here is that the states that are, friendly to these policies, will open the doors and allow for a smooth process. Doesn't mean that the DHS and the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction in parts of New York.
Right.
I'm not the expert on that, but I can tell you that the legal battles in the blue states that especially take their sanctuary city responsibilities, seriously, that could become, a real problem for the administration.
Thank you so much to you and to Morgan Stanley for your perspective on this. We'd love to have you in as this debate continues into 2025. Monica Guerra is head of U.S. policy for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. Paul, that was just a window. I mean, Mr. Trump's going to sit there in the Oval Office with the executive order and a big signature and go va-voom. I didn't hear that from Monica Guerra.
Well, we'll see. I mean, again, there's a, but I mean, certainly if you have the Senate and the House potentially, then there's a lot of momentum there behind a lot of his policy, certainly.
But actually,
and maybe in the first 100 days.
I'm fascinated by it, folks. Again, the one statistic I've seen, I'm sure there are many others, is 1 in 5 voters said immigration is all that matters, certainly folding into what we do at Bloomberg surveillance. And they 76% went for President Trump. That's just jaw-dropping to see that shift. Jaw-dropping as well as a market check. Dollar flat finally into the nervousness of the Fed meeting here at 2 p.m. under 105 on DX. Why Euro 107, make it 108, rounded up. Sterling off BOE rate cut. Not much going on there, 129.51 on cable. Euro Swissy for the pros, 0.94 on Euro Swissy this morning. Oil, well, I stand corrected. Oil a little weak here. American oil, $70.80 as well. Paul's watching gold up $3, $26.79. I see
Tom, we have to go to Bitcoin. We're off 1.25% here, but right at $75,000, Tom. for your Bitcoin?
We'll have to see. We're going to have continuing coverage. Please stay with us on YouTube. Help.
Now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and open up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being round. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Jerome Powell, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. It is Fed Day, 2 p.m. today. I guess a rate cut. Michael Ferroli over at JP Morgan out in the zeitgeist. They're going to cut rates. Okay. They're going to cut rates in December. All right. Paul, then what?
Then what?
Into the inauguration in 2025.
I mean, we've had solid economic data, Tom. We've had the yields move decidedly higher here with the 10-year Treasury. Boy, 4.41%. So we've had the yields push up higher here, Tom, in the face of a Fed that has started with a 50 basis point cut, and then we'll see what they do today.
House still undecided. We're sort of talking here sweep. A trifecta is the cool word.
Okay.
If you're at Brown University and you're trying to impress Professor Schiller, you go, how about that trifecta?
Yep, exactly.
We'll get to Wendy Schiller in a moment with an update. Take a look back to 2004. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning with a market up 16 on futures. We're brought to you by Cohen Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover optimization strategies that are helping CFOs make their finance function more competitive, more resilient. Talk to Cohen Resnick's advisors, and we thank Cohen Resnick for their work this morning. Futures green on the screen after a ginormous day today, yesterday, I should say, from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yeah,
Lisa Mateo.
Futures still advancing. The Trump trade went into overdrive yesterday. That sent stock indexes to record highs. You had the Dow surging to its biggest gain in 2 years. Right now, we'll start with Dow futures up 0.2% right now, 93 points. We have Nasdaq futures up 0.3%, 80 points. S&P futures up 0.2% or 16 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.23%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.41%. That's down 1 basis point. To currencies, have to point out because the dollar retreating following its best day since 2022. Right now, down about 0.3%. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger, Bitcoin that also rallied almost 10% yesterday. Now down 1%, still up at around 75,000. Checking with 2 stocks that really soared after Donald Trump was elected president yesterday. We have Trump Media and Technology right now down 13%. Tesla down about 0.1%. Shares of Qualcomm, that's the world's biggest seller of those smartphone processors, well, up 6%. It gave this bullish sales forecast for the current period. Meanwhile, you have shares of ARM Holdings. Now, they're that UK chip designer, also dependent on the smartphone market. Their shares lower. ADR's down 4%. It delivered a disappointing sales forecast. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. In the distant past, I stood at the 2004 Republican convention next to the Bush daughters, who were younger at the time, and stood behind Arnold Schwarzenegger as he gave one of the greatest speeches in the history of America. The entire audience, I think, out on TV was just stunned by the ferocity of Arnold Schwarzenegger on his view of immigration. Let us go back to 2004, the last time really that the Republicans had a trifecta sweep. Joining us, Wendy Schiller of Brown University. Wendy, in 2004-ish, around that range of years, were the Republicans able to use a trifecta in a sweep constructively? Did they get things done?
The short answer is no. President Bush wanted to do two things, as you might recall, after that election. He wanted to reform immigration, and he wanted to privatize a portion of Social Security so that you can still contribute to Social Security, but you could opt out for some portion of your payment and put it in a private stock account of some kind. And within 3 weeks, the Republicans in the House and the Senate said no to Social Security. And of course, as we know, they never got around to agreeing on immigration. Right. So when you think about that, that's what I'm looking ahead at. Sort of, if the Trump administration for the first year focuses on the economy and perhaps a border immigration bill, I think they're going to remain solid and strong going into 2026. But if they veer into social legislation, if they veer into sort of morality legislation, they could run into some serious trouble within their own party. And remember, we have a race for the Senate leadership. We have a new era. Mitch McConnell is not going to be the leader. What does that Senate look like? Right. So, tax cuts will go through, but I see some storm clouds ahead for anything else that they want to do.
Wendy, you're a piñata for the right. You come on. The YouTube lights up like a candle over this. I want you to speak to the Trump victory team about the efficacy of executive orders. The show in the Oval Office, the boards come on, there's a Donald Trump signature, great. Can President Trump affect what the Trump team wants by executive orders?
Well, I mean, in some cases you can, right? There have been very powerful executive orders. Going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, he revoked affirmative action in the federal government with an executive order. Congress tried to overturn that for many years with legislation. So there's a lot of ways where one executive order, and certainly Clinton did the same thing with the military, what we used to call, quote unquote, gays in the military. So yeah, you can do that. But you have to do it within the scope of the executive branch so that you can control how it's implemented. There's no point in signing an executive order that really can't be implemented. That just makes you look weak. So there are things that he can do. Certainly the Muslim ban, Muslim travel ban was executive order. So there are a lot of things. And all presidents, Democrat, Republican, have been switching to executive order for the last 25 years to really consolidate their power and get around Congress.
Wendy, for most administrations, that first 100 days are really key, and it's an opportunity to really get things done. What do you expect from the Trump administration, particularly now that they have control of the Senate and potentially even the House? What's the first 100 days look like?
Paul, it's interesting. We use that first 100 days typically when you're first elected in your first term. But this is a president who's already served for 4 years. So I actually don't think there's pressure on the Trump administration to get everything done in 100 days. And the other reason you need that when you're in your first term is you're going to run for another term. In this case, the Constitution prohibits that. That may change. You may get that 22nd Amendment repealed. But nonetheless, right now, there's not sort of a campaign to build for a future election. So I think they have time, and I think they should take time. This isn't just about Trump. This is about solidifying a very significant Republican win and winning back suburban voters. But you have to keep them to stay in power.
So, again, I guess one of the questions here for a lot of folks is, where's the focus of this Trump administration going to be from a policy perspective? What do you think is the top of their to-do list?
Well, I certainly think solidifying the border because it makes Trump look credible, right? So Biden shut down the border really in June of 2024. We can all agree that was probably far too late for the Democrats. But nonetheless, Trump's got to do that, and it's got to stick, right? He's got to make sure that's true. And then with interest rates coming down, inflation coming down, he doesn't have to do all that much. But then what happens when the first plant closes under his administration? In other words, when technology replaces jobs, when these areas that voted for him still lose their plant or their economic opportunities, what does he do to help them? That, to me, is the pressure on the Trump administration in the first 6 months.
You know, Wendy, I looked at the Taubman Center website today. I know you did a thing, I believe, last night there. And I look at all the freshly scrubbed interns and, you know, the young kids. But they're like, I want to be like this or that Republican or Democrat, whatever. But then we saw the concession speech of the vice president yesterday. Your thoughts on the future of Vice President Harris?
I don't know how the Democrat Party will react, but they still need women, and they still need Black voters, particularly Black voters. And so how do you interpret this? A Black woman lost? Does that mean no women? Hillary Clinton lost, Kamala Harris lost? I just don't see that as a viable electoral path for the Democrats. So I think she still has a career. I mean, I'm not sure what the future will hold. She ran the best campaign she could have. I think this was just really a referendum on the Democratic Party's policies overall. They were viewed as too far left and too redistributive. And they weren't redistributing to the people who got out the door and voted in big numbers on Tuesday.
To your expertise, the grizzled Schiller, let's do civics history, are there existing examples of a Democratic Party restructuring, realigning to a more centrist policy?
Yeah, I mean, the playbook is certainly going from Michael Dukakis in 1988 to Bill Clinton in 1992. It didn't take all that long, but the centrist party that really still had control in the South could deliver some southern states. And Bill Clinton was known, but not super well known. And basically, that operation built up within the Democrat Party, and he won that primary race in 92, and then he won and he served for 8 years. So, and that moved the party to more fiscally centrist policies, and it moved the party a little bit away from social issues. And he had credibility, strong credibility among Black voters, particularly in the South. So that is the combination that worked very well. And Barack Obama took a lot from the Bill Clinton mode of governing, which was practical and fiscally sort of more centrist. And I think that's where the Democrats have to go. Whether they can get there we're all going to be watching.
Professor, thank you so much. Wendy Schiller with us here, the history lesson from 2004 and President Bush to 1988 and Governor Dukakis. Futures up 18 with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, Lisa, former President Donald Trump's transition back to the White House is already underway in West Palm Beach, Florida. In a statement last night, Trump's transition team said the president-elect will be selecting personnel to serve our nation under his leadership that make the life of Americans affordable, safe, and secure. Yesterday, Vice President Kamala Harris called Trump to concede and congratulate him. Harris also offered her concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University.
To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed. But please know it's going to be okay.
Meanwhile, President Biden plans to give a speech around 11 a.m. Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. Turning to Congress, GOP control of the Senate is assured. Republicans have a 52-seat majority so far, with races still left to be called in Arizona, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Now Democrats are hoping to gain a House majority and avoid a full red wave. Right now, Republicans are in the lead in the lower chamber, 206 seats to 191. 36 races remain to be decided. 6 of them are in California, where absentee ballot rules make vote counting notoriously slow. The Department of Justice is set to drop the federal cases against Donald Trump before the inauguration. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
A Justice Department official tells Bloomberg special counsel Jack Smith is evaluating how to wind down 2 federal cases against Donald Trump in order to comply with a department policy that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. Smith may still seek to prosecute 2 of Trump's co-defendants in one of the cases. Smith charged Trump with illegally trying to remain in office after the 2020 election. And in a separate case, Trump was charged with illegally retaining classified documents and then obstructing federal efforts to retrieve them after he left the White House. It is not clear yet how these prosecutions will be brought to a close. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Bloomberg's surveillance this morning were brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. Jim Bianco out with the best tweet, without question, my tweet of the day. He steals it from Dario Perkins. There's a lot of that going on. You just steal something, and just as you give him credit, that's great. It's food prices, 2018, 2020, boom, 2022, huge surge. Food prices, U.S., U.K., Europe. And then they level out and they go up a little bit right now. And Jim notices that the economists look at the present, level out a little bit, and the electorate said, whoa, let's go back to 2022. Great chart, Jim Bianco. We'll get him on here in the future. Futures up 18, the VIX 13, 15.57. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks just trying to hold on to their post-election gains. The dollar, Treasury yields easing. Traders looking ahead at Donald Trump's return to the White House. Also what it means for the Fed's interest rate path. Today, policymakers will announce their decision at 2 p.m. Wall Street time, and that'll be followed by some words from Chair Jay Powell. Meanwhile, the BOE cut its key rate by 25 basis points to 4.75%. We'll head over to the numbers, get to the NASDAQ futures, up 0.4%, 104 points. Dow futures futures up 0.1%, 82 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, 18 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.23%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.41%. That's down 2 basis points. To commodities, we have Brent crude down about 0.2%, $74 a barrel. WTI crude $71 a barrel. Spot gold up about 0.6%, $2,676 an ounce. Stocks on the move. Drive-through coffee chain Dutch Brothers up 19%. It boosted its full-year total revenue forecast. Then you have mobile gaming software company AppLovin up 34%. Third quarter results beat estimates. And finally, dating apps, well, they're not just doing too well. Match Group down 12%. Fourth quarter revenue missed estimates. And Bumble, there you go, down more than 5%, posted inline results. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg dating app flash. Follow time.
Are dating apps so yesterday?
I think so. I have friends who are on them, and they're not.
Really?
Yeah, they're not anymore.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
You had friends on them?
Yeah, some of my girlfriends were on them, but now they're not. They gave up. I don't know.
Just go to a bar like the old days. I mean, isn't that how you do it?
No, really?
Exactly.
Really?
That's what I understand.
did not know that.
Exactly.
Thank you. I'm learning everything I can. What happens at a bar?
Great things can happen.
Across a crowded room.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you will know. Okay, let us continue. Enough with the Broadway act. Futures up 17, and this is a really important interview, particularly after, as Lisa Mateo said yesterday, things went up. Emily Rowland has had the courage to say, shut up, be in the market, buy America, get on board with the larger capitalization tinge, I should say. We reset after the election with Emily Rowland of John Hancock. Do you mind more Apple, more NVIDIA today, Emily Rowland?
Well, we do continue to emphasize the U.S., and you've seen that in the cross-asset performance over the past couple of days, and you're also seeing it on the earnings front. We always remember stock prices follow profits, and we're seeing better earnings out of U.S. large-cap stocks than we're seeing across the globe and across market cap in the U.S. So it's still an overweight for us in the U.S., as well as going down into mid-cap stocks, which are potential beneficiaries of more expansionary pro-cyclical fiscal policy, given the overweight to areas like industrials. Oh, by the way, Tom, I just wanted to say, I met my husband at a bar, and we've been together for 23 years, so it works.
It works.
Is this like Foley's on, Com Ave, or is this like Kenmore Square?
I love that place. More like downtown Boston.
Durgan Park. Yeah. Okay, I remember.
There you go.
There you go. Very good. Is that too much information?
No, that's
I probably
perfect.
HR is going to come down. Ken
I think it's
going to come
perfect.
down and yell at me. Save me, Paul, please.
Exactly right. So, Emily, again, you talked about some of the. If we think about what's changed in the world over the last 24 hours with President Trump-elect getting such a strong showing, the Senate and now potentially the House. So, economic policy presumably will be even more pro-business. How do we play that?
Well, I think, Paul, the challenge is that a lot of it's in the price already. Okay. It's interesting just looking at the bond market. We've seen this 80 basis point roughly back up in bond yield since mid-September. We looked back at what happened in 2016. Now, remember, a lot of the moves came after the election. This time, the markets have sniffed this out as Trump's odds of winning the election had improved going into the election. Last time the moves happened after the election, and the 10-year Treasury yield rose also 80 basis points, and then it consolidated or moved sideways for a year. We saw another pop when pro-cyclical policies were introduced, most importantly, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But guess what? 10-year Treasury yields actually then fell over the course of 18 and 19 as the markets reacted to the lagged impact of Fed tightening in 17 and 18. So in 2019, yields did a complete round trip. And you can do a really similar chart for things like small cap equities or regional banks. So I think what's happened is we've pulled forward that trade, and it actually might deserve a breather here after such a strong run.
We do have the Fed today. Let's not lose sight of that, Emily. What do you expect to hear from our Fed chairman today?
I think he's going to try to be as boring as possible, frankly. We expect a 25 basis point cut. That's what's in the market. We've seen some of the odds shift a little bit for December. There's now about a 30% chance that the bond market is saying that the Fed might hold in December. But we expect the Fed to continue down this path of sort of mechanical cuts to get back to a more neutral rate. I think the press conference could maybe be interesting. There will be questions around fiscal, around trade. I think he's going to try to push back on all of that, though.
Emily, my great theme is corporations adapt. We're all going to adapt, particularly if we get a House sweep. Folks, we do not have a decision in the House of Representatives yet. Paul and I are sort of assuming a GOP sweep like 2004-ish, but we're making it up as we go. But Emily, if we get there, how do corporations, how do CEOs, how does the Blue Chip Council, how do they adapt?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, if we do see corporate tax cuts, and to your point, a lot of the political strategists that we listen to are saying it's a maybe, but that tends to be very accretive for earnings. We saw it back in 2017. We saw about a 5% pop in next 12-month earnings growth. You could see something similar here, and corporations are going to have new uses of that cash. Now, unfortunately, last time it was supposed to be used for investment in CapEx and hiring more people, and it was just reinvested. So you might see that in the form of things like buybacks. But listen, again, it was accretive to the price of those stocks, and that can be something for investors to focus on.
But can you, as a grizzled pro, can you go as far as say GOP sweep, nominal GDP pop, revenue pop for American corporations?
Yeah, and I think that's what the market is looking at, and that's why the S&P 500 is trading at a new all-time high, seemingly every day. The challenge, again, is around the price. We're sitting at 27 times trailing earnings. That's about as expensive as stocks have ever been. This is the third highest valuation in history. We just had a massive bull market, up over 50% over the last 2 years, which was all entirely due to multiple expansion. Remember, earnings growth's actually gone nowhere for the past 2 years. So all of the gains that we've seen have been in multiple expansion. I think pricing in this world of better economic growth, better earnings growth, there's a lot already in the price. Something to think about.
Emily, thank you. I got off the Bloomberg here, PE of the SPX, 25, maybe extraordinary. You can even go up to a 28 on a P if you take out some fancy extraordinary items I don't understand. Emily Rowland, thank you so much. She met her husband in a bar. That's what I learned.
That's how I think all the great romances start.
John Hancock as well. Oh, Paul and I get into so much trouble here. Emily Rowland, what a great call. Can't say enough about that. Thank you so much. Futures up 16. Dow futures up 64. The VIX 15.63. I'm watching the 10-year real yield, and that's wrapped around the Fed meeting. It's come in a little bit, 2.03%, but what did Greenspan say? Ebullient?
Yeah.
I can't pronounce. Guerra can pronounce it. It's like a David Guerra word. Yes. It's like something Guerra would do. But whatever the word is, Lisa, am I right here? Ebullient? Ebullient? Ebullient. It's some fancy word Alan Greenspan and David Guerra used, and I don't see that in the 10-year yield. I need like a 210 or a 212. In the 10-year real yield, and I don't have it yet.
No,
Paul.
we got 2.04%. I'm looking at the the yields are just pulling back just slightly here today. Tom, the 10-year Treasury is down to 4.41%. The 2 years at 4.23%. So we're going to keep an eye on that. We'll have full Fed coverage this afternoon, Tom. So we'll see if we get 25 and what the language is about future.
Are Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines off today?
I think they're done. I think they're taking a month off, and they're saying enough. Don't talk to me. Don't call me.
Yeah, great coverage. They've had enough. Kaylee did like 82 hours straight or something.
Yeah, she did.
Absolute trooper. It was just amazing. It's Fed Day. We will be here. You heard Emily Rowland say the press conference, it may matter. Again, 2 p.m. The Fed decides. This is Bloomberg's Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have markets taking a little bit of a breather after digesting the effects of Donald Trump's presidency. And that really sent stock indexes to record highs yesterday. As far as this morning, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, Dow futures up about 0.1%, 58 points. We have S&P futures up about 0.2%, or 13 points. We're starting to get some more economic data out in just a few moments. We have initial jobless claims for last week. Coming in, the survey was for 222,000, coming in at 221,000, and that's after revised up 218,000 the prior week. All right, as far as the reaction, still about the same on Wall Street right now. We'll get over to the two-year yield, 4.23%. That's down 3 basis points. We have the yield on the 10-year, 4.41%, and that's down about 1 basis point. We head over to shares of Lyft, soaring up 23%, reported strong guidance, record trips. Then you have Ralph Lauren up 6%. Second quarter earnings blew past estimates there. And shares of aircraft engine manufacturer Rolls-Royce Holdings down 3% in London. A dip from that record high engine flying hours toward the low end of their guidance. And finally, we move over to energy. Halliburton reported adjusted earnings per share third quarter missed estimates. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Our economic indicators brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Trade over 10,000. U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, United States treasuries, and more on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around the clock. That's ibkr.com/around the clock. Now, Paul, I remember this, this is back, John Fremont and Millard Fillmore, and of course, James Buchanan took the trophy in 1856. Abby Joseph Cohen does not remember 1856. She's too young for that, but she does know what unified government is. It's really an interesting thing. A great paragraph. I'm stealing this from News Nation. I got some nice history here, if I can find it. But unified government is more common than we think. There's been 23 times Democrats have had unified government, 25 times Republicans have had unified government. Abby Joseph Cohen of Columbia University, we'll get to the markets. Abby, is gridlock good, or can we get something done with unified government that supports American finance and capitalism?
Wow, that's a big question, Tom, and thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. It depends what unified government decides to do. So clearly, if you have a policy agenda that is favorable, unified government is good news. If not, there are a number of things to watch out for.
Abby, what do you expect here? We've had obviously a big change on the political stage here in the United States. What's your expectation of a second Trump presidency, and what does it mean for markets? We've certainly had a big rally yesterday in financial assets. What do you expect going forward?
Well, let me put the marker out there, which is don't know, because we don't yet know, for example, who the key members of the administration will be. We don't know who the Secretary of Treasury will be, for example, nor do we have an idea of who some of the other members of the cabinet will be. The other thing that we're not sure about, of course, is what happens going forward with regard to regulatory policy. Now, there is a presumption that less regulation is good for the economy. That's not always the case. Obviously, regulation is not always perfect, but there are a number of areas in which looser regulation is, in fact, quite destabilizing and inflationary. So, for example, looser antitrust policy is typically associated with higher inflation, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on. The other thing that we need to keep an eye on, because members of the Trump organization have been chatting about this, and when I say Trump organization, I'm referring to the campaign, not the company. They've been talking about providing a very easy regulatory environment for crypto. And that's something that could, in fact, be problematic with regard to whether it creates a source of potential instability for the financial markets.
Listen to that. I mean, I don't know. Let's do a crypto data check here. Right now, I quoted the Doge yesterday for the first time ever. 74,700, down 1,100. We had 75,000 print on Bitcoin.
We did for Bitcoin. So, Abby,
let's make the point, however, Tom, and that is there has been some discussion among Trump advisors that digital currency could be used on bank balance sheets for regulatory purposes. And basically over time, over history, we see that the best assets to put on bank balance sheets are the ones that are not quite so volatile.
Exactly.
She's so political. She's just got it down cold. She's laughing at me because she knows exactly where I am on this, Paul.
She knows what she's doing. Abby, I guess the last time we chatted, you were concerned about concentration in the market, as are a lot of people when you think about the Magnificent Seven or some of the AI trade here. Has anything changed there? How do you think about that, just the health of this equity market here?
Yeah, wonderful question. And if we had a crystal ball and we knew what earnings were going to be like in 2025, we might be able to answer it better. Yesterday's close on the S&P 500 in excess of 5,900 is something that really is touching the top end of the range that many people had expected as it relates to valuation for the S&P 500. So to think that the market in general can go higher from here, you really need to have an enthusiastic view about economic growth next year. But we also now need to worry about the interest rate aspect of valuation. While there's been so much focus about how much the stock market responded yesterday, there was also a big response in the bond market. And with higher interest rates, that creates more of an obstacle to equity valuation as well.
Are the earnings that we're seeing, Abby, this quarter, last quarter, and more importantly, kind of the forecast, are the earnings there to support this market, or do we really have some valuation concerns here?
Based upon consensus earnings expectations, things look like we are okay, but clearly there's very little margin for error. So should there be some unpleasant surprises, perhaps in one of the high-profile names on the company side, or perhaps some unpleasant inflation news, or interest rates move notably higher from current levels, that in fact could be problematic. But let's go back to the original question, and that is Mag 7 versus the rest of the market. There are much better valuation opportunities among small and mid-cap names, and some people might also argue that there's some opportunities outside the United States. The problem, of course, is that the U.S. economy is looking far more robust than many other nations are at this point.
Abby, I think about, if this had occurred, all this maelstrom that we're in right now, it occurred 30 years ago, you'd be on with Lou Rukeyser Friday night, and Lou would turn to you and say, okay, what is the exuberance? Ed Yardeni, who we all respect immensely, models out the roaring 20s. He models out a bull market. I'm not asking you to give me an S&P call, but are the roaring 20s that we get with a Republican House, Senate, and presidency, can they lead to an exuberance that causes harm, or can we be managed in our enthusiasm?
The exuberance that you were referring to earlier, Tom, when Alan Greenspan spoke about it, was irrational exuberance. And the irrational exuberance that Greenspan often referred to was not just in the equity market, but also in the fixed income market. So we need to be looking there very carefully. And one of my concerns, and I think needs to be carefully monitored by investors, is what will some of these new policies mean with regard to inflation? The starting point is quite good. If you exclude housing, which I know is a big exclusion because it does harm many people, but if you exclude housing prices right now, core inflation is already under 2%. So it's a great starting point. There are, however, some possibilities that inflation could be rising from these levels. For example, if you have fiscal policy that stimulates demand, but not supply, all other things being equal, that's inflationary. Getting rid of the Affordable Care Act is inflationary. On a long-term basis, not paying attention to climate change is inflationary. Think about the wildfires right now in California, how much that costs to bring under control, to rebuild. And then, of course, insurance costs go up for everyone afterwards. Just think about insurance costs right now in the state of Florida because of the bad storms over the last few years.
Right. Abby, we want to come back. I want to squeeze in one quick question. I want to come back on productivity and technology. But is the fiscal deficit, our debt and deficit, is it a constraint for President-elect Trump?
It is a constraint only if, from a political standpoint, it is a constraint. Right now, with the dollar as robust as it is, I think that there will be demand for Treasury securities from around the world. And I also think that at current rates and maybe higher rates that we'll be seeing, there will be demand for those securities and we can finance it. The question, of course, is the long-term one. If we have a situation where we in fact see lower growth in population and labor force, that does not bode well, for example, for the funding for Social Security and other needs of the government.
Right. Abby Joseph Cohen with us, and we will continue 2 days after this election. She is at Columbia University. Red and green on the screen. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. President Biden is preparing to address the nation about his party's election loss as Donald Trump prepares to make his comeback to the White House. Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick has more from Washington.
Washington, D.C. is a city that was prepared for something much more chaotic than this, with memories not only of 2021, when there was the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, but also looking back to the 2017 inauguration of Trump, there were tons of protests. There are places in D.C. that had the windows boarded up in preparation for this, but it's been much quieter, much more normal.
Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick in Washington. Biden's address is at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. Hurricane Rafael just ripped across portions of Cuba. The Category 3 storm knocked out the country's power grid. Rafael will also bring deteriorating conditions to portions of the Florida Keys later today. California firefighters are working to contain a rapidly burning brush fire in Ventura County. Ventura County Fire Chief Dustin Gardner says the mountain fire has already burned more than 14,000 acres.
This is a classic San Ana event. We've got sustained winds more than 50 miles an hour with gusts over 80.
Another wildfire, dubbed the Broad Fire, is burning in Malibu. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz called for a snap election after divisions over how to revive the lackluster economy triggered the breakup of his three-party ruling coalition. The crisis came to a head with Scholz's shock dismissal of his finance minister late last night. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. It is a survey. It's out at YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast. Go to YouTube and Bloomberg Podcasts. We'd like to know what you would like to hear on Bloomberg Radio. Obviously, more Michael Barr is one of the questions that we got.
Thanks, cousin.
But we really want to know, on a Bloomberg audience survey, what you would like out of Bloomberg Radio. We're curious in this new digital age. Visit youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast, youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast. You can click the link to our profile, the community section as well, to take the survey. We thank Material, our partners in all this. Survey Material. It's an independent survey. I don't get the results. Fill it out now at youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast. And yes, Lisa Mateo asked me, is there a question that says, put a cork in it, Tom? Yes, there is a question that says, put a cork in it, Tom. We're going to continue with Abby Joseph Cohen. I want to get her perspective on what is rallying this nation in productivity and technology. I think that's important. Finally, right on the screen, the Dow goes a little bit negative. Futures up 12. NASDAQ up 0.4%. On YouTube, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have futures, well, there's a little bit of steam that's following yesterday's historic rally. It comes after more economic data. Applications for U.S. unemployment benefits, well, they ticked up last week, increasing by 3,000 to 221,000 last week. And U.S. labor costs, well, they rose more than expected on cooler productivity. Later this afternoon, the focus will shift to the Fed. They announced their decision on interest rates. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, 95 points. Dow futures, little changed, up 23 points. S&P futures up about 0.2% or 15 points. The 2-year yield at 4.23%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.42%, and that's down 1 basis point. To commodities, we have Brent crude down about 0.1%, $74 a barrel. WTI crude $71 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,683 an ounce. Shares of Moderna up 7%, better than expected profit sales in the third quarter. A big part of that was that early start to sales of this season's COVID boosters. Then you have Tapestry raise its guidance for the year, better than expected quarterly revenue at Coach. Yes, Coach. They also have Kate Spade. Strong sales in Europe, their shares up more than 4%. And it looks like the rich got a bit richer yesterday. The fortune of the world's 10 richest people surged by a record $63.5 billion after Donald Trump's presidential win. Elon Musk alone, get this, added $26.5 billion to his net worth. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. I have really been looking forward to this conversation. There's something going on in America. For those of you that listen every day, it's just plain and simple. I disaggregate. There are the haves, the have-nots. I think we saw that within the tension, the disparity, the polarization of this election. And I want to wrap it around the Nobel Prize of Acemoglu, Robinson, and Simon Johnson. We hope to speak to Simon Johnson here in the coming days, the laureate on productivity, his book, Power in Progress. Abby Joseph Cohen with us now, Columbia University. Abby, there's a labor input, there's a capital input, and there's a strange thing, total factor productivity. Bill Easterly at a school south of Columbia makes clear it's a huge part of economic growth. Is our productivity gain going to an ever narrower part of the American public?
I think you've answered your question. And the answer is yes, of course, it has been. And one of the things that any new administration needs to address is to make sure that all of our people feel that they're participating in the American growth and the American dream. And one of the things that we need to focus on, of course, is long-term investment, by which I mean, are we investing in productivity? Are we investing in education in our people? And are we investing in the scientific merit and the scientific progress that gave us so much economic growth over the past few decades? And the answer to those questions will really have a dramatic impact on all of us. One of the things I'm concerned about, quite frankly, is something called Schedule F. Which has been talked about during the last few years. It was something that was, in fact, enacted by the prior Trump administration, but was gotten rid of immediately when Mr. Biden came into office. Now, what is it? It's basically not looking at the top level of political appointees in the U.S. government, but the next 40,000. So there are 10,000 political appointees. Below them are the 40,000 experts in a variety of categories, and under Schedule F, many of these positions would be converted to political appointments rather than appointments based upon what do you know. And I worry that this will affect, for example, a number of our science agencies, and will also affect a number of the agencies that are directly involved in boosting productivity throughout the economy.
Abby, again, we've been so focused on the political agenda over the last several days that we almost forget we've got a Fed meeting today, and that historically has had an impact on these markets.
With our future Fed chairman, Abby Joseph Cohen. I think she's shortlisted by President Trump.
Very good. So, Abby, what do you expect to hear from this Fed today?
You guys might recall that I started my career at the Fed. I was a very junior economist, and I don't think I'm being invited back. The Fed always works best when it is apolitical, when it looks at the facts that it has in front of it and makes a decision about what needs to get done. Obviously, they do a forecast based upon their prospects for the economy. And at a time like this, whenever a new administration comes in, you're never quite sure what the new policies are really going to be. There's a big difference between the campaign and governing. So I believe that the Fed will make an apolitical decision. They'll look at the data in front of them, which basically says the U.S. economy is doing well. Inflation has come down, except for housing, as I mentioned before, and of course the price of eggs, which the Fed can control because of avian flu. And I think the markets have it right in terms of expecting a 25 basis point reduction in the Fed funds rate. But let's be clear. What is happening in recent weeks, of course, is that intermediate and long yields are going up. So what we're ending up with is a steeper yield curve, a more normal looking yield curve. And who borrows at the Fed funds rate? You know, it's not individuals, it's not corporations, it's banks. So the banks will be borrowing at a somewhat lower Fed funds rate. The thing to watch, particularly if you're an equity investor, is what's happening at the intermediate and long yield level. And yesterday, those yields all moved higher.
So, Abby, we're 80% through earnings for the S&P 500 here. What have you seen? What have you heard? In terms of guidance and outlook here from this earnings cycle for corporate America?
The cycle has gone well. The economy underneath it has been growing well, not as quickly as it was in the immediate post-pandemic period, but it's a good, solid, sustainable rate of increase. What I often look at, as do so many others, particularly this time of year, is the forward guidance. And what we have seen is that the forward guidance, by and large, is good. There are some exceptions. There are some companies with idiosyncratic problems that have decided not to issue forward guidance. But in general, what companies are saying is consistent with the consensus economic forecast, which is that there is no recession on the near-term horizon. For the United States, growth is pretty good, and it's good enough to generate not just profits, but also jobs. Last month's data were, disrupted by strikes and storms and so on. But it looks like we're creating enough new jobs for everyone who wants to look and get one. There's obviously friction. People need to take some time to find the right job for them. But this is an economy that's doing quite well.
Abby Joseph Cohen, thank you so much. Thrilled to have you on here 2 days after the nation votes. Abby Joseph Cohen of Columbia University. Futures up 16, and we were red for a bit. Dow comes back fractionally. NASDAQ up 0.46%. The levels, I can't even equate, Paul, we're like near SPX 6,000.
Yeah, we are.
I don't get it.
44,000 on the Dow.
I don't get it.
For John Farrow. Almost 21,000 NASDAQ, so we're big kind of headline numbers there for sure.
Headline numbers, that's a nice way to put it. Ed Yardeni reaffirmed the roaring 20s. He's worried about the unknown of the administration. Again, and Lisa, help me here. We haven't heard the House Democrat or House Republican yet.
No, not yet.
We're waiting.
We're still waiting. TikTok.
Yeah,
maybe early next week is kind of what
really that far out.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Okay. That's what I've read on
Bloomberg. Because of California and all that. And
I don't know why. It just seems like with today's technology, really, we have to wait that long.
Well, you've been really good about that. I mean, Pennsylvania is saying they got like 1 million votes and then 700,000 they got to count. And what is it? 7 people at a table?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
It's clumsy.
In Latrobe.
We put my answer is we put a man on the moon.
Right.
How hard can it be?
1969.
But I'm speaking out of turn, which is, of course, not unusual. The Sweeney yield 4.22.
Yeah.
Excuse me, percent. We'll have to see. I guess a statement will be do no harm. But the Fed decides this press conference could be a doozy. Really want to emphasize I'm in the camp where Chairman Powell is going to do everything.
And Tom, we've got full Fed coverage today. Stick with us for a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance, The Fed Decides, featuring our own Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferrer, Lisa Abramowitz. That's coming up at 1:30 Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio TV and Bloomberg Podcast.
Okay,
page.
I wrote in Taylor Swift. What can I say?
Looking for has been
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. In this hour, we drive to the Fed meeting at 2 p.m. We drive to markets, resetting, repricing off of what could be a GOP trifecta. The Senate, the House still not decided. And, of course, President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, is he picking out a cabinet? Is it accurate to say that?
I think so.
And they're ahead of schedule. They're more organized than last time.
Time. That's what I understand.
Good morning to Mr. Lutnick of Cantor Fitzgerald, who I think is helping Mr. Trump in the new administration in that. Coming up here in moments, without question, our conversation of the day on the future of the left, the future of the Democratic Party. Thrilled, just really thrilled. Christina Greer could join us from Fordham. She's truly expert on the pulse of a nation that I guess was defeated, we would say, 2 days ago. We'll talk to Professor Greer about that. A lot of investment ideas as well, again, with Futures Up 14. Let's get right to it. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Our poll's out there. Please take the poll out at YouTube. Bloomberg Podcast on your commute this morning, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and Good Morning in Washington, 99.1 FM, up to Boston, 92.9 in Boston. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And after the Dow surged to its biggest gain in 2 years yesterday, right now, Dow futures, little changed, up about 10 points. NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, 99 points. We have S&P futures up 0.2% or 15 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.22%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.39%. That's down 3 basis points. To currencies, a difference here, too. The dollar retreating. It had its best day since 2022 yesterday. Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin. What a difference a day makes there, too. Down 1.5% after it rallied almost 10% yesterday. It's now at about 74,000. Checking in with 2 stocks that really soared after Donald Trump was elected president. Shares of DJT, they're now down 14%. And shares of Tesla down about 0.3%. Moving over to shares of Qualcomm. That's the world's biggest seller, smartphone processors. Well, they're up 5%. Shares up 5%. It had a bullish sales forecast. Smartphone demand picked up. But then you have ARM Holdings down 3%. It had a little bit more of a tentative outlook. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. We've been talking, Eric and I, as we piece together the show, of who we want on to pick up the pieces after a concession speech yesterday by Vice President Harris. And the first name that came up holds court at Fordham University. She holds an absolute franchise. There's no other way to put it on blacks within the political process in America. There's one item, which I just say, I love the title. I mean, she sits all day and tries to figure out these titles. A Nation Divided Still, How a Vote for Trump Says More About the Voter Than the Candidate Himself. That in 2017. Christina Greer joins us this morning. Christina, there was an eloquence in Vice President Harris's exit yesterday. How do the Democrats pick up the pieces?
I do think, good morning, gentlemen. I do think that the Democrats need to come to the table and try and figure out what happened. Now, keep in mind, it's barely been 36 hours. So this all feels a little bit like Monday morning quarterbacking. Go Eagles. So as the Democrats try and figure out a 50-state strategy, as they try and rebuild state houses across the country, as they try and tap into whatever policy issues beyond just economic issues. Now, keep in mind, many Americans felt they go to the polls because of pocketbook issues, but they felt inflation was too high, that, when they had their bills at the end of the month, things weren't going in their direction. it's a complicated story for Democrats to tell, to say, well, under Trump and some of his policies, and usually in Republican policies with tax breaks to the wealthy, Democrats have to come and rebuild the social safety net that Republicans tend to take away, and also rebuild the economic foundation of the nation. That's a much longer argument because voters don't really care. They care about how they feel in that present moment. And clearly that message wasn't articulated to the voters the way the Democrats needed it to be.
To pick up the pieces and looking at the punditry across the East Coast and the elite, you're part of the game, you know, the educated elite and all that, as you correctly state, they have to speak to 50 states. Doesn't that simply mean the left has to move to the middle?
Well, this is where it gets frustrating. I mean, in the past, you know, Jesse Jackson is the architect of the 50-state strategy, if you remember his 1984, but his incredibly successful 1988 campaign. But, you know, I always show my students the distribution curve, right, that hump in the middle. In the past, we have had presidents who all clustered around the middle. We had George H.W. Bush, we had Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama. That is, in our modern presidency, that's where presidents hung out. Obama was not a radical president.
I don't mean to cut you off. This is really important. David Brooks's essay a couple weeks ago was brilliant on this, as you are right now, Professor. What happened? How did the Democrats decide to polarize versus stay to the middle as President Obama and President Clinton did?
Well, the historical context is important because Donald Trump pulled the party far, far, far to the right. Now, we've seen people campaign on the margins, but then govern and win a general election in the middle. He was successful by never coming to the middle. Never. He pulled his party to the far right because in many ways it's a campaign of populism and the candidate himself. So Democrats tried to chase that as they moved farther and farther to the right and left out a core element of their base on the left. And so as they try and figure out what that means, some of the concern among Democrats is, since the Democrats have moved more to the center and more to the right, will they stay there or will they go back to the left and really hammer in, which I think they did an excellent job, but hammer in some key issues? Union membership, making sure public education is accessible, making sure climate change is acknowledged so people don't have to worry about constantly moving because of climate and becoming climate refugees within their own country. There are larger, much more complicated issues that the Democrats were trying to explain to the American public, but Donald Trump sells something very different. And we cannot ignore the fact that he sells a type of brand of American whiteness that is very attractive to a large percentage of this country and many people who aren't even white. There's an element that James Baldwin explains so much better than I. There's an element of white supremacy in this nation that we have to be real about the fact that it still exists, that he sells, that is incredibly attractive to voters. And has been for quite some time.
And Christina, you point out one of the issues I thought was really interesting as I start reading some of the analysis of the voting, that President Trump did surprisingly well with African American and Latino, and particularly on the male side. What do you make of that?
Well, I think some of it is just baked in misogyny, period. There's some people, men and women, who will never be able to vote for a woman at the top of the ticket. We're one of the few democracies of our stature who's never had a female elected leader, and I think that stands out on the global stage.
Sure.
His inroads with African-American men, albeit in certain states, he went up a few percentage points. And I think that is a conversation in a Black politics sphere because Black people are so ideologically different, but by and large are trapped in, we call it party capture, in one particular party. However, Black women and Black men are still, by and large, incredibly more supportive of Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party writ large. Latino men and a growing population of Asian American men as well are more attracted to the populism and the economic promises of Donald Trump. Now, they remain to be seen because they were not materialized during his first tenure, but there is a certain level of, if Bell Hooks explains sort of supremacy to us, of patriarchy that is incredibly attractive to a lot of new voters.
Christina Greer, Wendy Schiller was on earlier from Brown, I think associated with a more democratic tinge of academic politics. And she mentioned how Dukakis went down in flames, and you turn right around and you find a centrist Southerner in William Jefferson Clinton, and off you go with the Democratic Party recovery. Do we have, within a fractured Democratic Party, the ability to move to the center, whether it's to the South or the Midwest or the blue wall that Trump took?
I think we're going to have to excavate what states, Georgia is increasingly purple, but it's not just the voters, it's the infrastructure in many of those states. We have, secretaries of state that make it harder and harder for people to participate. We have to excavate what happened in a place like North Carolina, where Democrats did incredibly well. Democratic, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, but somehow the presidency was lost. And even in Virginia being a little tighter. So it really, honestly, for me, depends on who will be in charge of the DNC and the DCCC to really organize some of the data that we're seeing and we're still seeing.
We got time. This is really important. Thank you so much, Professor, for bringing this up. Who would you like to see to take that tough job to pick up the pieces of a shattered left?
Honestly, someone like a Pete Buttigieg, who clearly has a way of serving as a faithful surrogate, but understanding a zeitgeist of the American public that I didn't think I'd ever say that, but he's quite impressive in a 360 view.
Professor, don't be a stranger. Thank you so much. Christina Greer, Fordham University this morning. We hope, folks, you appreciate our political coverage. We're trying to do the best we can across the right and the left here in America, and, of course, talking about the markets as well with a big recovery we've seen. And staggering over to the Fed Day at 2 p.m. That conversation we just had, we're not going to have that with Jerome Powell this afternoon, Paul.
I don't know, but we'll have to see.
We'll have to see on that. Quickly now with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, a former president and former presidential candidate are reacting to Vice President Harris's election loss to now President-elect Donald Trump. In his statement on X, former President Barack Obama wrote, "This is obviously not the outcome we had hoped for, but congratulated Trump on his victory." And Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders rebuked Democrats, saying it should come as no surprise that a party that abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. Yesterday, Harris delivered her concession speech at Howard University, where she offered a message of optimism for the future.
The light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up and as long as we keep fighting.
Vice President Harris called President-elect Trump to congratulate him. President Biden will give an address today at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will cover it live. Now, Democrats are pinning their hopes on the House to avoid a full Republican sweep. GOP control of the Senate is assured. Republicans have a 52-seat majority so far, with races still left to be called in Arizona, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Current Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell outlines what he believes will be priorities going into the new Congress.
The filibuster will stand. There won't be any new states admitted that give a partisan advantage to the other side. And we'll quit beating up the Supreme Court every time we don't like a decision they make.
In the House, Republicans currently hold a 206 to 191 seat edge. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
To see the Senate Majority Leader there, and it speaks, I guess, to Biden, to Harris, and all. Mike McKee was eloquent on this the other day. He had some beautiful quote. I said, Mike, that's so amazing. How did you think that up? And he said, well, it's Macbeth from Shakespeare, you idiot. Time is moving on.
Yep.
You know, there's a huge part of this is just a shift of moving on here in 2024. Are we ready for 2028?
Oh, let's let it ride.
Model it in.
Sure.
You know?
Who knows?
Start thinking about it. We'll
be here.
Well, thank you for the many comments on Professor Greer's appearance from Fordham University. Futures up 17. NASDAQ up 0.5% as we're at 15.57 on the VIX. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, stocks battling to hold on to their post-election gains. The dollar, treasury yields easing. Traders looking ahead to Donald Trump's return to the White House. Also, though, what it means for the Fed's interest rate path. And speaking of which, policymakers announcing their decision, 2 p.m. Wall Street time, and that's followed by some words from Chair Jay Powell. Meanwhile, the BOE cut its key rate by 25 basis points to 4.75%. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, 119 points. Dow futures little changed, up 23 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, or 18 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.22%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.39%, and that's down 4 basis points. To commodities, Brent crude down about 0.7% at $74 a barrel. WTI crude $71 a barrel. We have spot gold up 1% at $2,685 an ounce. Shares of Lyft, well, they're doing just that. They're up 20%. Strong guidance, record trips it reported. Then you go to Nissan. It cut its annual profit outlook, announced plans to eliminate some 9,000 jobs globally. Then you have high cocoa prices pushing Hershey to cut its full-year sales outlook. Those shares down 3%. And finally, Wendy's, depending on AI from a Dan Ives' favorite, Palantir, to keep up with its $1 Frosty demand. Yeah, the technology is going to help it spot those potential shortages before they even happen. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
They're doing an AI with a Wendy's Frosty?
They have to keep track of inventory. They're only $1. Do you know how fast that
Paul
goes?
Sweeney, when he worked at McDonald's, was keep counting at 1 French fry.
Right,
2
exactly.
French fries.
Yeah, exactly. 2 days
Okay.
at McDonald's I lasted.
Palantir to the rescue, I
Tough
guess.
press.
Futures up 18. The VIX 15.54. Joining us now with prodigious ability and chops is Dean Kern at Macro Risk Advisors. What was your first day like in analytical finance at Chicago? That's like, in the old days going to the Dallas Cowboys. I guess now stepping in the field with the Kansas City Chiefs. How dumb did you feel your first day in analytical finance at Booth?
You walk into Gene Fama's 431 class, and it's a packed house, and just by virtue of having heard from others, that it won't be so packed in about 3 weeks because he'll literally fail you. And so you got to get out of the way if you're not doing well.
What was great about Professor Fama, I was so honored to speak to him the day Milton Friedman died. And what was so great about Professor Fama is he went beyond the math. How did you go beyond the math to concept in analytical finance, which we really need right now?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question because if you actually took one of the exams, you weren't doing any calculus. You had algebraic equations at best, but he really was testing you for your deep and thorough understanding of it. And I think what I most value about that, and it was literally 30 years ago at this time I was taking it, was he really helped you understand how to read academic papers, read them with a real keen eye for what they were looking for, and a certain humility about what we do and don't know about markets. He'd always say, we have a model, the model's going to be false, but it doesn't mean it's not useful. And there was just a certain amount of humility that I took away from
Our
it.
heads are spinning VIX 22 to 15. What's the model, right? What's the Dean Kernett model now on VIX? Are we going to 12?
We could be going a little bit lower from here. The playbook has basically been executed just like we expected it, which is the election is in a class of on-the-calendar catalysts, like earnings, like the Brexit referendum, like FOMC days, where all of the uncertainty comes out in one day, and implied volatility is very expensive going into it, and then once the news is out, implied vol has nowhere to go but down. So no surprise at all to see the VIX dump. The question is, I think what you're asking is, where does it land from here? And there are a couple things that are going to matter. The first and foremost is realized volatility. So realized volatility has been trending in the 10 range. That's going to justify VIX at around 13. And so you got to ask yourself, okay, well, what undoes that? And it's going to take something. It's going to have to be some decided change in earnings. It's going to have to be something on the geopolitical front There's always the risk of an internalized financial market accident, just given all the products that are built in this market. But I would say, Tom, the base case is for the VIX to sort of land in the 13-14 range from here.
Listen to that, Paul.
I like that.
I should buy my first share.
Well, you've been calling out the VIX, keeping us focused on the VIX. So, Dean, for obviously huge change in the marketplace, the world in the last 24, 36 hours. How is that starting to impact your view here? How are you incorporating a Trump win and a Republican looking like a pretty strong win across the board? How does that incorporate into your view?
So someone once called me the Jerry Seinfeld of derivatives.
Okay.
And I think maybe that's better than being called the George Costanza, do the opposite of derivatives.
Right.
But
The Yankees would have won if Costanza was still traveling second.
That's very true. That's very true. But, my process is really about noticing things, like Seinfeld would notice things. And what do I notice from yesterday? The VIX is down 20%. The dollar was up 1.5%.
Yep.
That's happened exactly no times before that, except November 9th of 2016, which turns out to be the day after the first Trump win. The dollar was up, the VIX was down a lot. And so I'm just trying to understand if we can glean anything from that. A stronger dollar isn't necessarily disruptive to the market, but I would say that a stronger dollar in tandem with higher rates and a persistently high level of rate volatility, so the MOVE index came down as well, but it's pretty sticky. It's going to be in the hundreds range. And that's not typical for the Fed during an easing cycle. I think this press conference is going to be fascinating. We're up 80 basis points or 70-odd basis points in the long end since the first ease in September. That doesn't feel good. And so I'm really curious to watch this press conference.
Right.
And look, volatility is about change. We just had a seismic change in the leadership of the country.
I totally agree. Catherine Mann dissenting at the Bank of England today as they cut rates. Ed Yardeni out with his bull market call, I'm going to say a VIX to 12. And Ed Yardeni saying they're out of their minds, pause here, given rate structure and a political turmoil. And Liz Ann Saunders at Schwab agreeing yesterday, nobody's talking about a non-event today. What will that debate be like? Do you think they'll actually engage a debate to not cut here?
I mean, if you're Jerome Powell, you've got a PhD, doesn't actually have a PhD, but he does have one in non-answers. And so he'll talk around it, but I do think this is going to be really critical. Obviously, today's 25 is baked in. They're not going to not do that. The December one I find a little bit more interesting and kind of shocking to see the market's got it 3/4 of the way there. Folks like Goldman have it penciled in and then a couple more. I just don't know. I think you've really got to be mindful of what the back end is doing.
Right.
Obviously, you mentioned Yardeni. He's the bond market vigilante. That's his phrase. And I do think we're supposed to really keep an eye on that critical price.
We got just enough time here. In the mathiness of what you're following, the cross moments, kurtosis, what's a single insight you can give our audience now within the deeper math of macro risk advisors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the S&P is running a 2.5 Sharpe ratio over the last 365 days. That's incredible. You shouldn't have to leave your couch to earn that kind of spread. You don't need to do any fancy stuff.
That's amazing.
It's liquid.
Folks, 1's a big deal. 1.5 is you're kidding.
Right.
We're at a 2.5.
And so, that's both a numerator and a denominator result. The denominator is the 12 realized vol. And I think to your question, Tom, what I'm really struggling with is what I would call the internal diversification of the S&P. And that's the insanely low level of correlation among the stocks, especially the super caps. NVIDIA to Microsoft to Apple, they're really uncorrelated.
Yes.
And that brings down volatility. I think that's something we are missing.
How good is St. John's Hoops going to be this year?
I'm hopeful.
You got to be more than hopeful.
Yeah.
I think they can go big.
I've been hopeful before.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
Are they playing Maine?
I don't know. Yeah, that's right. Playing Maine, the Maine Bears. But they've got some really good players this year.
They're like finally back, like they're in the game.
Oh, they're big
D1.
now. Yeah, Patino, right? And he's got them ready.
I'll have to read it. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not up to speed on this. Kernet won't come back unless I get up to speed.
You have to read in on St. John's Hoops. Right?
Okay.
Okay, we'll do that.
I got to read up on Knicks, and I promised someone in Boston at 92.9 FM. I got to read it on the Celtics. Oh, wait, that was my daughter.
That's right.
Hey, stupid, get up to speed on the Celtics. That was the middle child speaking. Futures up 17. Dean Kernet, thank you so much. Macro Risk Advisors. It is Fed Day. We'll do it at 1:30. John Farrell just walked by. Thumbs up. He's looking for a rate cut.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with a new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF insights to learn more. All right, well, we have a lot of some information coming in. Before we get to that Fed decision, we're talking about applications for U.S. unemployment benefits. They ticked up last week, increasing 3,000 to 221,000 last week. We also learned U.S. labor costs rose more than expected, cooler productivity. The numbers are coming in. Let's see how things shape up for today. We'll start with the S&P 500, up 0.3%, 20 points at 5,949. We have the Dow up 0.1%, 45 points at 43,778. The Nasdaq up 0.5%. 109 points at 19,095. We head over to the two-year yield, 4.23%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.39%. That's down 4 basis points. We have Brent crude, $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. We'll check over at spot gold right now, $2,688 an ounce. We have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, euro British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 1%, around 74,000. At the open, we're checking in with Lyft. Its shares up 21%.
Wow.
After the open, we have Airbnb, Expedia, Lucid, and Rivian. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Can you get Lyft and Uber to have more cars at 4 a.m.? You know, can you work on that, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, that's your market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, is there anybody out there? This is a joy. If you are ever so lucky and you're 17 or 18 years old and you're going to college and you want to do geopolitics and trade and international, if you land in a classroom at Dartmouth College with Douglas Irwin, that's pretty good.
That's good. Okay.
Joining us now, the ever so fortunate Gerard DePippo joins us, senior geoeconomics analyst. Gerard, just quickly here, Doug Irwin wrote the Bible. There's no other way to put it. Against the Tide, an intellectual history of free trade. What was it like under Irwin at Dartmouth? What did you learn that you could carry over now to the coming trade battle and tariff battle in America?
The key, he's very much focused on learning from history, right? And so I think learning that there are sort of cycles in U.S. policy where it may be going back to the way things were before World War II, where there's more of a protectionist impulse, right? But I mean, his broad view is that protectionism doesn't work very well. We might find out whether that is tested again soon enough.
Are we going back to blockism of 1920s and 1930s? Is that where the president-elect will take us with China?
Well, in a sense, no, because I don't think that Donald Trump thinks in terms of economic blocks. It's more bilateral, so it will be less multilateral. So the Biden administration is thinking more sort of a pro-China or maybe pro-U.S. System of alliances and partnerships. Trump is less about that. He's more about sort of one-off interactions with different economies, and ultimately it's about how is their trade with the U.S.
So, Gerard, what do you believe will be the policy for tariffs here from this Trump administration? Obviously, that's one of the economic policies that was kind of pretty much front burner during the entire campaign. How do you think they will pursue tariffs, and how will that impact geoeconomics?
Well, first of all, Trump loves tariffs. He's made that repeatedly clear, saying it's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. There will be more tariffs. I think we can be confident of that. The numbers everyone focuses on are the 60% he talked about imposing on China, and the 10 and then later 20% he talked about as a universal tariff. I would take those seriously, but not literally. That might not actually be the number. There's also a question of would he actually attempt a universal tariff? One reason I think he would not is that there are legal reasons why he might have to use, say, IEEPA to try to sort of declare a global emergency, but there's also he's very transactional, right? He likes to negotiate, and if you apply a blanket tariff on everyone and say that's just what it is, it's actually less effective for those negotiations. So I suspect it will be more of a bilateral approach as it was during the first Trump administration, but I definitely think that China's in the crosshairs.
What do you think China's thinking here when they woke up and saw that Donald Trump had won a second term here? What do you think their initial reaction was?
Probably nervousness. I mean, so before the election, there was a debate about which side the Chinese government preferred. I think they were probably tilting towards Harris. On the one side, Harris would be more sort of pro-alliance in a way that they would find threatening, but also would have been more predictable. With Trump, there's more the possibility to negotiate, but there's also probably a greater willingness to use the tariff sledgehammer, right? So I think they're thinking this is happening in a rather inopportune time because the Chinese government is trying to boost the economy and confidence. And if Trump, say in March or April, whenever, starts lobbing tariffs at China, that could be undermining that effort.
Gerard DePipo with a senior geoeconomics analyst with Bloomberg Economics. So what's as you dive into this with your expertise, what should our audience be watching for, as Paul mentioned earlier, the first 100 days of Trump 2? What's the thing you'll be focused on in terms of our geoeconomics?
First, I would look at who is in Trump's cabinet, and we don't know that yet. It's purely speculative at this point, but I think that will help shape the contours of the direction of policy. Second, they have a lot of executive orders ready to go. We don't have all the details, but those could be coming out very quickly. That will tell you also where the direction of things are going, including on the trade side. Finally, I'll look at how other countries are responding. So, for example, China will have its 2025 budget announced in March, right? And so that's an early indicator of how they're responding.
Yeah, but to be clear here, and I'm ignorant on this, help me, Gerard. Can he do tariffs with China or tariffs with Canada or tariffs with Peru by executive order?
So there are various authorities that Congress has delegated to the executive, right? So there's Section 301, which is what he used for the first trade war against China. There's Section 232, which is on more national security grounds. There's also IEPA, which gives the president rather sweeping powers to designate something as a national emergency. Generally speaking, I'm not a lawyer, but my strong impression is that U.S. courts are fairly deferential when it comes to matters of national security and deciding what is and is not a national security risk. However, if they go the 301 route, as it did the first term, there's a process there, right? You actually have to you have to put in the filing. There's a comment period, and the tariffs are announced before they're actually imposed. But I think from Trump's perspective, it's not about just hitting with tariffs right away. It's about threatening with tariffs to get that discussion going and negotiate along the way, which is how they played it during the first term.
Gerard, what's the feeling in D.C. in general? Among the folks that kind of deal with this day to day about tariffs. Is there support for tariffs? Do they feel like it's if nothing else, a good negotiating tool? Or are there those that say, hey, it's just a tax upon the American consumer? What's the feeling in D.C.?
I think there's still a general bias against them, but Trump is the clear winner and dominant within the Republican Party. So I think people on a normally sort of more pro-free trade side on the Republican Party are being quieter about it. I think amongst a sort of intellectual think tank class, there's very little support. I mean, there's some institutions like American Compass that Orrin Cass runs that try to push tariffs as an argument. But in general, I'd say that the consensus is what it was 5 years ago, right? It's that tariffs are inefficient. They're going to raise prices or reduce output. And insofar as the concern is national security, they're pretty inefficient or indirect way of addressing the problems.
Just quickly here then, what about on EV vehicles? I haven't seen any Chinese EVs waltzing down Fifth Avenue. I mean, where's it going to sort out on electric vehicles with Tesla manufacturing in China? They're not manufacturing here.
So, I mean, there's multiple threads there, but I think on EVs, I do not think that the Trump administration would be getting rid of the very high tariffs that the Biden administration imposed on Chinese EVs. However, Trump has said that he would be receptive to Chinese investments in the electric vehicle sector within the U.S. I think he personally believes that. I'm not sure how the rest of the system will react if he actually tried to do it. But I think the odds of substantial market penetration from Chinese EVs in the U.S. are quite low.
Now, one final question. Did you age over the weekend when Harvard beat Dartmouth right at the end there in football? I mean,
I never had hope. They were never good at football. It was always more of a hockey situation when I was there.
Well, they could. I mean, a hockey team there is, it's like, D1.
Yeah.
The Lovejoys.
It's a cold school.
Yeah.
It's all the cold weather games.
It's the Dartmouth bubble. Gerard DePipo, thanks so much. When you see David Blanchflower, say hello. Mr. DePipo is with Bloomberg Economics, geoeconomics, just brilliant there on this tariff discussion. No doubt we'll be doing more of this into 2025, and I'm really committed to discussing immigration, migration as well. It is across all of this nation the key topic, it seems. Red and green in the screen, down a little bit red. NASDAQ on a tear, up 0.8%. Lisa, is that lifting us?
Lift. Oh, I like
I
that.
like that. Thank you. With our news in New York City to save us, Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, Lisa, thank you very much. President-elect Trump says he will return to the Oval Office with a clear mandate, and he may be more prepared to implement it than the first time he took office. More on that from Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw.
When he first, took over in 2017, when he took office, he was still listening to a bunch of establishment Republicans and sort of feeling his way and was a little tentative at first. And I think that's going to be gone. He's going to have a set of clear plans, things he wants to accomplish right away. And he's not going to be as inclined to listen to people, including sort of civil servants and folks inside the government that he felt were the ones that were holding him back last time.
Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw. Later this morning, President Biden will give an address. It will take place at 11 a.m. Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. Now, Democrats are pinning their hopes on the House to avoid a full Republican sweep. GOP control of the Senate is assured. Republicans have a 52-seat majority so far, with races still left to be called in Arizona, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. Current Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell outlines what he believes will be priorities going into the new Congress.
We need to ramp up defense spending in order to prevent a direct conflict with our adversaries.
In the House, Republicans currently hold a 206 to 191 seat edge. One more election we're keeping tabs on, the race for mayor of San Francisco. The city is still tabulating results from Tuesday's election, but so far, political newcomer Daniel Lurie is holding his lead over current mayor London Breed. With votes still uncounted, Lurie has more than 56%, with Breed at 44%. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. It's that time of year where we change from football to men's basketball early in the season. Army playing Duke, and then Kentucky plays Duke. Is Kentucky still, they're ranked 23rd?
Kentucky's Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky's Kentucky.
You going to head down? You got Rockstar seats?
No, I'm just going down for a little other business tomorrow, but we'll check out. I'll check out practice tomorrow. Actually, I'll check out practice today. What am I saying? I'm going to be in practice today. Yes.
Very cool.
Yep.
Well, we'll have to see. It's at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
March Madness can't come soon enough. I've never won. Michael Barr, you won one year, didn't you?
I did win 1 year.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was like, wow! I did something right for once. That was pretty good. So
I won 1 year, big envelope of cash from a local establishment. So I donated to the church, and my priest is like, whoa, where did this money come from? It was in an old white envelope filled with, it was like 10 grand filled with 20s. And it's like, no, it just came from a betting pool on the Final Four.
Oh, so what did you spend it on?
I gave it to the church.
Oh, wow.
Go have fun. I don't know. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Very good of you.
A big wad of 20s.
We say good morning. We're trying to get back off the election, and again, we're still waiting here. Michael Barr, it's true. We don't have a House decision yet.
No,
to be clear,
we do not.
Somebody out on YouTube live chat said it's like 44 seats or something.
Yeah.
Into next week? Into next week.
It's in the 30s. It's going to go in the next week. California, there's still 6 races out there, and they're notoriously slow for counting it. So we're not going to know for maybe a little bit.
Well, thank you for the comments. We're just really humbled by the turnout. YouTube, Bloomberg podcast, some heated comments right and left about who we're, talking to. The Trump people all tied up in Mar-a-Lago. We're trying to get some of them on. And, they're busy, and all that. But we're going to continue to look at the markets, and it's an extraordinary tape, as you heard from Dean Kernet of Macro Risk Advisors. The 10-year real yield comes in today. 2.00%. That's germane. 10-year yield lower. Real yield. 10-year real yield is lower today. Right now, the lead story right now into the Fed meeting at 2. NASDAQ up 0.9%. On YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen, and this is as traders await word from the Fed on interest rates. Policymakers expected to lower rates by 25 basis points. We'll also hear from Chair Jay Powell, likely to face questions about what Donald Trump's return to the White House will mean for economic growth, also for inflation. So right now, let's get to the stocks. We have S&P 500 up 0.3%, 21 points. The Dow, little change, down about 11 points. The Nasdaq up 0.8%, 158 points. We head over to the two-year yield, 4.22%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.38%, and that's down about 5 basis points. Yesterday at this time, shares of Trump Media Technology, they were soaring. Tesla was also higher. Right now, we check in with DJT, down 15%. Tesla, right now, the shares are little changed. Moderna, those shares up more than 2.5%, better than expected COVID vaccine sales. And then you have shares of Tapestry up nearly 4%. That's a company behind brands like Coach, Kate Spade. There you go. It's got a new life after that failed deal to buy Capri. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
I mean, I don't know, Lisa, if you know this, but the coolest thing in fashion a million years ago was this little store in Soho, I think, southern Manhattan. Then it was like a mecca where you would go get beautifully made red leather belts. And it was called Coach. That's all they did. It was way before, the whole fashion thing and all that. And that was just the coolest
There
thing.
you go. Yep.
Way back. Guerra Malik with us now, with a lot of perspective here, and particularly the perspective of do nothing. Paul, why don't you bring in Guerra Malik as we try to be patient at
Absolutely.
Dow 43,750.
Exactly. Gaurav Malik, CIO at Palace Capital Advisors. Gaurav, I'd love to get your perspective on just kind of how you process the last 24, 36 hours, a huge change on the U.S. political front. How does that color, if at all, your outlook for investment?
Nice to meet you all. I think that heading into the election, we had been thinking quite a bit about long-term themes that we want to invest in. And that to us was CapEx, AI spending, defense spending. So the portfolios that we had all had been positioning towards that area. The last 24 hours have just accelerated our view that we should do that more aggressively, given that the Trump administration is likely to be strong, as we were hearing from Mitch McConnell, going to be stronger on defense. The lack of regulation or looser regulation is likely to spurn more activity in the tech space and the financial space. You saw big rallies in those areas. So for us, it's a lot about trying to shift away from core, I would say, growth AI themes to more diversified themes across the globe. So into value sectors, perhaps, into industrials, and then also looking a little bit more on the other side across the pond. Is there more that could occur with international equities, whether that's in Europe, Japan, or emerging markets? And then certainly putting a lot more for our clients to work in the private equity space. So we do like that a lot more with the decision over the last 24 hours.
Are you worried about a lockup in private equity or private credit? I mean, the lack of illiquidity, does that really work within wealth management?
We're less concerned about that. The client base we have does have a lot of clients that are in the ultra high net worth space, which means they can live with the lockups. And I think for any segment of the marketplace, if you're willing to live with a little bit of lockup and earn that additional 200-300 basis points over the long term over public equities, it's a nice place to be. And if you were asking me this question in 21, 22, when it felt like private equity was overvalued, overlevered, I think the last 2 years has been about marking down positions. It's been about, say, old-fashioned PE, which means taking on and putting more money to work in the equity of a firm, investing a lot more in EBITDA expansion. Those things we do get excited about. We think it's a great time to be looking at those deals.
And you feel that can outperform traditional Standard & Poor's 500 investment?
We think so. We think that we do believe. I mean, the way I look at the math in my head is that, over the 10-year horizon, we expect earnings to grow by perhaps 6 to 7% in the S&P US large cap, maybe a little bit more than that. And then we think about private equity. Well, we expect that the fundamentals, the earnings should grow faster than that, at least 20, 30% faster than that. That would justify being in those markets. And we see a lot of evidence with our partners that companies are achieving those types of objectives.
You can focus on Mag 7, and you can do this, folks, if you're a double E from Aberdeen. University of Aberdeen is the most beautiful school in Great Britain.
It is.
Nobody knows about it. It's way up north. I mean, there's winter in the 4th of July, and that's about it. But it's like a movie set. It's an absolutely spectacular school.
You know, it's funny that a lot of people don't know about it. And then today I've been invited by the UK Embassy because they're holding a session for graduates of Scottish universities in Boston. So it's Scotch tasting and maybe some haggis in the mix.
I'm afraid to ask which beverage will be served. Gaurav Malik, the Mag 7 right now. Come on, you can't sell out Mag 7 old double E, can you?
Well, it's difficult to sell it off, but I think there are choices to be made within the Mag 7 space. And then you look at other places that are undervalued, that you feel comfortable that maybe could get you similar returns over the long term. I think the AI revolution, while great and has shown up in the earnings we see across the Mag 7 space, I think is now moving into phase 2, which is like, what is it doing for bulk of the companies? And I think one of the things we look at is, well, what's the deployment? What is the usage? What's the benefit AI is providing to those companies? And as we look at that across the spectrum, one of the things we do like about, one is we do like the fact that it's spreading out to more and more industries, but we also like the fact that international companies have not caught up to the US. So almost in every sector, if penetration in the US is 50, 60%, the use of AI, in Europe is sitting at 20 to 30%. So there's a bit of catch-up that could occur in those markets that could drive that. So it's about being balanced about it, I guess, that yes, continue holding your positions in some Mag 7 names, but also incrementally look at diversifying away into value, diversifying away to international, and then certainly look at PE as a place where you can park some cash for some period of time and get some excess returns.
So, Gaurav, in terms of wealth management alternatives, what percentage do you think is a reasonable percentage for your average client to think about alternative investments? You mentioned private equity earlier.
Yeah, so we have been going through an exercise internally about what do we think is the appropriate level. And I would say that from our perspective, for almost anybody, like literally, I mean, really anybody, and there's a proliferation of interval funds now, 10%, something in that order, I would say 7 to 10% is a good place to be. I mean, the stories about the old Markowitz thinking in 50s and 60s. What's the reason for a 60-40? It comes from that was about the market cap of equities relative to bonds. If you were to apply that same logic today and you were to own one unit of the market, PE and private credit would take you to about 6 to 7%. So 6 to 7% would be like you're owning a little bit of everything in markets. So I think that's a safe place from our standpoint, a good starting point to think about your alternative allocations.
Gaurav, thank you so much. Oh, the blue button, the Detroit Lions blue button. Gaurav Malik, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it, with Palace Capital Advisors up in Boston as well. We got a scheduled road trip up to Boston here.
We do, coming up in I don't know when that is.
I got to go over to Fenway and get some merch. This is the year for the Red Sox.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's the year.
Oh, that's a week from tomorrow. Okay, we'll be up there.
We're going to be up there. Green on the screen right now. Lifting of Dow, it's fractional. NASDAQ legitimate, up 0.9% in the NASDAQ. The levels, 43,700, almost 6,000 on SPX. Let me say that again. 59.54 on the Standard & Poor's 500.
Wow. Exactly.
I think it was 12 when I entered the business.
Exactly.
NASDAQ 100, 20,900. Just amazing what we're seeing there as well. We're going to be here tomorrow. We got a Fed meeting today to get through. Usually Wednesday, it's Thursday. Election got in the way. So the Eccles building shifted that. We hope to get clarity at the Powell press conference here. The Bengals, they're hazy. Good morning.